Chapter 260. Go to watch net. Seeing the last 4 words, Li Yundong was completely shocked. He didn't expect that the words he saw in front of him were written by the mystical silver fox, the strongest but most controversial of the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong couldn't help but walk to the wall and reach out to touch it. He felt that the touch was extremely hard. It turned out to be the hardest granite. He reached out his hand to touch the grooves of the carved words and was surprised to find that they were actually carved by human fingers. This shock was no small matter. Li Yundong couldn't help but be shocked. Was this carved by human hands? How is this possible? Li Yundong channeled qi to his fingertips and tried to carve words on the stone surface. But as soon as he exerted force, he felt a sharp pain on his fingertips. The hard granite surface didn't move at all. Li Yundong suddenly took a deep breath. He was a reborn body of Jindan, and his physical body was far stronger than that of ordinary people. After mobilizing his Jinqi, although his body was not invulnerable to swords and spears, the hard iron stick of ordinary people was like scratching an itch for Li Yundong. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. But even so, Li Yundong still couldn't leave any trace on the hard stone surface. It could be seen how shocking it was that the mystical silver fox had carved words on the stone surface with her fingers. Li Yundong looked up at the wall full of words and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He seemed to see a huge shadow looking down at him. He was so weak. But this thought only flashed in Li Yundong's heart, and it was replaced by the high fighting spirit of catching up. I've already passed the divine tribulation. What else is there to be afraid of? The mystical silver fox, a weak willow girl with a 5-leek body, can cultivate to such a level. I, a man with a 7-treasure body, can't cultivate to such a level? Li Yundong took a deep breath and began to look at the heavenly Jindan technique engraved on the wall again. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that the cultivation method described in it was incomparably exquisite and amazing. Go to watch net. 113 Shui 4 net. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly laughed and thought to himself, isn't this the 9-yang sutra of the cultivation world? He was focused on the heavenly Jindan technique when he suddenly heard Lin Youfa laugh wildly and say loudly, I found the door. I found the door. Lin Youfa pointed to a crack in the wall in front of him and said, it's here. After saying that, he pushed the door hard, but it still didn't budge. He shouted to Li Yundong, Jinrenli, come and help me. Li Yundong walked over to take a look and pushed the door with Lin Youfa. However, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't push the door open. For a moment, Lin Youfa was very discouraged. He looked at the door and cursed, F*CKU, what the hell is this broken door doing? Lin Youfa wanted to find a powerful magical weapon, but Li Yundong's mind was focused on the 9 inner elixir technique at the wall. While he was thinking about the meaning of it, he heard Lin Youfa say, Jinrenli, do you think this door needs your fan of 7 treasures to open again? Li Yundong came to his senses with an ah. He looked at the wall carefully, swept it with his hand, and shook his head. No, there are no patterns or grooves on it. Lin Youfa saw that Li Yundong's expression was flickering, as if he was deep in thought. He was surprised and thought to himself, is this guy deliberately not telling me, and then he wants to find an opportunity to leave me and take these powerful magical weapons by himself? He was muttering in his heart, but Li Yundong ignored him. He walked to the wall and carefully looked at the words on it. Only then did Lin Youfa notice Li Yundong's actions. He also looked up curiously. At first, he was full of impatience. The more he looked, the more surprised he became. Especially when he saw the last signature, Lin Youfa jumped up and said in a trembling voice, the mystical silver fox. This was actually left by the mystical silver fox. Li Yundong turned his head and looked at him. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He thought, I don't know how amazing this mystical silver fox is. After more than 1,000 years, its name alone can still shock people so much. Li Yundong unconsciously took 2 steps back and carefully looked at the words in the room. He couldn't help sighing in his heart, these words are really majestic and magnificent. They don't seem to have been written by a woman at all. In particular, the 4 words, mystical silver fox, were really domineering and romantic. At first glance, people could believe that these 4 words must have been written by the mystical silver fox. Amazing, truly amazing. The more Li Jiandong looked at it, the more amazed he was. He was amazed by the heavenly Jindan technique and the mystical silver fox. Watch net. Color * caret and text learn %super #speed. Update. After reading this, Lin Youfa stammered in shock, this is the lost heavenly Jindan technique. Lost? Li Yundong asked curiously. Lin Youfa turned his head to look at him. Of course, Chen Pu's master was Han Zhongli, one of the 8 immortals. Later, he created the heavenly Jindan technique, which was regarded as one of the supreme treasures of Taoist cultivation. However, it was lost in the chaos of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. I didn't expect to see the complete version here. Lin Youfa's face was full of ecstasy. He couldn't wait to practice this cultivation technique immediately. But soon, he looked at Li Yundong warily, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he said, "Zhenrenli, let me tell you something. Although there are conflicts between us, we have fought side by side before. We are comrades. As the saying goes, it's better to get rid of enmity than to keep it alive. I think it's better to resolve the grievances between us. Especially now that we are in danger, we should work together to get through this difficulty together. If there's anything else, we can solve it when we get out. How about that?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said straightforwardly, "Okay." Lin Youfa was overjoyed. He stretched out his hand and said to Li Yundong, "A gentleman's word." Li Yundong said, "A whip on a fast horse." After that, the 2 of them clapped their hands in the air and made an oath. Lin Youfa had been seeking such a superior cultivation technique all his life. At this time, when he saw it, he was like a hungry person traveling in the desert seeing good wine and delicacies, or a woman who had been away from home for a long time meeting a strong man. How could he bear it? Lin Youfa sat cross-legged in a corner of the room with his back against the wall and began to qi according to the heavenly Jindan technique. Although he had sworn an oath to Lin Youfa, he had always been reserved and vigilant in his heart. However, when he found that Lin Youfa was meditating, the vigilance in his heart slowly relaxed. After all, meditation could not be faked. Li Yundong sat cross-legged on the yin-yang rush cushion in the middle of the room, put the fan of 7 treasures aside, and began to qi. The 2 of them ran their own qigong in the room. After an unknown period of time, Lin Youfa woke up from his deep meditation. Although he was a cultivator, the Taoist magic he cultivated was the inferior qigong of the cultivation world. This kind of kung fu was based on the overdraft of his own vitality, so it was very damaging to his own yuanqi. He could not go on after only cultivating to the 2nd phase, so he automatically woke up from his meditation. After Lin Youfa woke up, he let out a long sigh, which was full of emotion and vicissitudes. He sighed because he had the opportunity to take a look at the most magical and mysterious cultivation method in the world when he was old. He had lived for decades, and the previous days had been in vain. After Lin Youfa exhaled, he saw Li Yundong meditating in the middle of the room, and then he walked closer to take a look. This look didn't matter, but Lin Youfa was suddenly shocked, jealous, envious, and hateful. He saw Li Yundong sitting on the rush cushion, with a straight and condensed white qi coming out of the top of his head. The color of his face was constantly changing, one moment it was red, the next moment it was black, and the next moment it was cyan. Lin Youfa knew that this was because Li Yundong had cultivated to the 7th phase and was changing his internal organs. The heavenly Jindan technique had 9 phases. The first phase was Dan subduing, the second phase was Dan forming, the third phase was Yang nourishing, the fourth phase was Yin nourishing, the fifth phase was bone transformation, the sixth phase was flesh transformation, the seventh phase was 5 viscera and 6 organs transformation, the eighth phase was cultivating fire transformation, and the ninth phase was becoming immortal transformation. At this time, the 5 qis on Li Yundong's face were changing. Obviously, the 5 qis of the heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney were constantly running and changing his internal organs. That was why there was such a strange expression on his face. Lin Youfa thought to himself, I have cultivated for dozens of years, but I have only cultivated to the 2nd phase in one go. I originally thought that after learning it, I would practice it slowly. One day, I would be able to cultivate to the 9th phase. At that time, I would come out and compete with the cultivators in the world. But I didn't expect that the young man in front of me would actually cultivate to the 7th phase in one go. This person's talent is really terrible. If he is here, how can I have a chance to stand out? Lin Youfa was eager to be strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come out to find trouble with Li Yundong as soon as his disciple urged him to compete with him to see who was stronger. The more Lin Youfa thought about it, the more jealous and unwilling he became. He watched the 5 qis on Li Yundong's face change. The white qi on the top of his head rushed to the roof and then spread out like clouds. He was even more jealous and couldn't help thinking, this person is so amazing and has a grudge against me. If I go out, I'm afraid I won't have a good life. Thinking of this, Lin Youfa's heart skipped a beat. His eyes fell on the fan of 7 treasures beside Li Yundong. He couldn't help but think of the magic of the fan of 7 treasures before, and his heart became even more greedy. Why does he have such a good powerful magical weapon, but I don't? Why is it that he is able to practice such a marvelous spell with such ease and advance by leaps and bounds, while I stumble and stop at the 2nd turn? Why is God so unfair to people? For a moment, Lin Youfa was angry, and he became bold. He smiled grimly and said, Zhenrenli, although you are amazing, you can actually cultivate to the 7th phase in one go, but I woke up in the 2nd phase. Humph, but no matter how capable you are, you can't resist at this time. At this time, it will be easy for me to kill you. Heh, this 7 treasures psychic fan, I'll help you keep it. After that, he turned his hand and slapped the top of Li Yundong's head fiercely. /OM/45278941954 Chapter 261 Go to watch net. Lin Youfa's palm was fierce and sharp. If it hit, even a stone would be torn apart, let alone Li Yunyang's flesh and blood. Watch net. 7 KOM. But when he slapped down, his heart was filled with murderous intent and evil thoughts. The fan of 7 treasures beside him felt the murderous intent rushing toward Li Yundong. It immediately jumped up and automatically protected its owner. Back when Li Yundong was at school, the fan of 7 treasures had jumped out to protect him on its own when a freshman had provoked him. Now, Lin Youfa wanted Li Yundong's life. With a swoosh, the spiritual fan of 7 treasures opened up and spun like a sawtooth wheel. The fan blades chopped toward Lin Youfa's palm. Lin Youfa never thought that the fan of 7 treasures would automatically protect its owner. He was caught off guard and felt a sharp pain in his arm. His palm was cut off and fell to the ground. After the spiritual fan of 7 treasures chopped off Lin Youfa's arm, it didn't stop at all. It spun rapidly with a buzzing sound and chopped toward Lin Youfa's body. Lin Youfa endured the sharp pain and let out a loud roar. His other hand grasped the ribs of the fan of 7 treasures and stopped the terrifying chain-like blade of the fan from spinning. But as soon as his hand grabbed the fan of 7 treasures, the fan's leaves immediately jumped out and turned into countless flying swords. In an instant, they pierced through Lin Youfa, turning him into a hedgehog. Lin Youfa's body trembled violently. He looked at the fan blade pierced through his body in disbelief. He saw that the golden words on the fan blade were soaked in blood, and they immediately released countless wailing ghosts. These evil ghosts wailed and drilled into Lin Youfa's body. After a while, they pulled out his 3 spiritual and 7 mortal souls from his body. In this round stone chamber, countless cyan ghosts were pulling Lin Youfa's soul and devouring it crazily in the air. Lin Youfa screamed and howled loudly. After a while, his soul was completely devoured. Then, these ghosts, who had eaten their fill, rushed into the leaves of the fan of 7 treasures one after another. The fan blades emitted a burst of golden light and were automatically extracted from Lin Youfa's corpse. Then, they quickly returned to the fan ribs of the fan of 7 treasures. The fan of 7 treasures killed Lin Youfa in the blink of an eye, and it fell back to its original spot with a thud, motionless. At this time, Li Yundong had finished practicing the 7th turn and was directly heading for the 8th turn. He didn't notice the situation around him at all. His body had been transformed by the Renyuan Jindan before, and at the same time, he had also succeeded in the Zhuji phase. Zi Yuan had also helped him cultivate with elixirs. In addition, he had absorbed the power of the heavenly thunder when he was undergoing the heavenly tribulation. However, he found that after practicing the heavenly Jindan technique, his own primordial qi, the Jindan primordial qi, and the heavenly thunder qi in his body had merged perfectly. From then on, they had become one, and the connection between the qi in his body and the Niden was much closer than before. His essence, qi, and blood were endless, and his jinqi was much stronger. Watch net. 7 KOM. He had succeeded in practicing the heavenly Jindan technique. He stood up and bowed respectfully to the words carved on the wall. Then he walked to the crack in the wall that Lin Youfa had found before, took a deep breath, and pushed hard with both hands. With this push, the stone door rumbled and was slowly pushed open by Li Yundong. After Li Yundong pushed the door open, he saw a narrow and long tunnel in front of him. There was a faint light coming from the end of the tunnel. Li Yundong's heart shook. He turned around and took the fan of 7 treasures on his back, then walked quickly along the tunnel. The more he walked, the brighter the light in front of him became. When he reached the entrance of the cave, he pushed aside the dense leaves and weeds at the entrance. Immediately, a dazzling light shone in. Li Yundong subconsciously narrowed his eyes and used his hand to block the dazzling sunlight. When he got used to the light, Li Yundong realized that he was on a cliff halfway up the mountain, surrounded by weeds and crooked trees. Below him was a Taoist temple hidden in the jungle. There were shouts and shouts coming from the Taoist temple. Li Yundong's heart trembled. Is this the Fox Zen school? He mobilized his jinqi and controlled his body to fly down. Along the way, he was very careful to fly to the roof of the highest hall of the Taoist temple under the cover of the trees. Then, he poked his head out and looked down. In front of the main hall of the Taoist temple, there was an extremely spacious square. The square was paved with bluestone with a pattern of yin and yang tai chi. The black and white dots in the tai chi were placed with 2 3-legged cauldrons, one black and one white. The cauldrons were filled with incense and smoke. In the direction of the main hall stood about a dozen men and women in Taoist robes. Most of them were women, and most of them were beautiful with slender figures. Almost all of them had injuries on their bodies, and they were staring angrily into the distance. In the middle of the field, a woman in a Taoist robe and holding a saw-toothed vajra wheel was fighting with a man holding a steel whip. Li Yundong searched around these people, but he didn't find Su Chan. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. He was a little anxious and worried, afraid that something had happened to the little girl. Li Yundong thought to himself, no, the little girl is so vigilant. Nothing will happen to her. If she can't beat him, can't she run away? Moreover, her invisibility skill is so good. Nothing will happen to her. While he was comforting himself, he suddenly heard a loud shout from below. The woman holding the Vajra wheel suddenly let go of the Vajra wheel in her hand. In the blink of an eye, the Vajra wheel turned into countless sharp sawtooth chains and rushed toward the cultivator holding the steel whip. Like countless black pythons, they swallowed him in the blink of an eye. Li Yundong only saw a burst of fire and dense clanging sounds of iron colliding in the black steel storm. Even with Li Yundong's eyesight, he couldn't see what was happening inside at all. This continued for around 3 seconds before these sharp sawtooth chains abruptly retracted, and in the blink of an eye, they once again combined into one, transforming into a sawtooth diamond chakram. It stopped by the woman's side and emitted a buzzing sound. It was awe-inspiring and cold to the extreme. Li Yundong looked at the cultivator in front of her, who had originally been holding a steel whip. The steel whip in his hand had become bumpy and full of sawteeth. His body was also dripping with blood, and his flesh was badly mutilated. His whole body had turned into a red bloody man. After the cultivator swayed for a while, he fell down with a thud. After a while, his Yin spirit flew out of his body, pointed at the woman, and cursed angrily, "Yi Yu, you evildoer, how dare you destroy my body?" Yi Yu sneered and said angrily, "If you're not convinced, let's fight again." The cultivator's face was full of fear. He just fell to the ground and hid in the crowd, not daring to fight again. Only then did Li Yundong notice that there were many people standing not far in front of Yi Yu. At a glance, there were about 100 people. Some were wearing Taoist robes, some were wearing ordinary clothes, and some were wearing long robes and mandarin jackets. All of them had different weapons in their hands. 2 young men quickly ran out of these people and dragged the body of the cultivator who had been killed to the back of the formation. When the cultivators saw the body being dragged past, they all made way and whispered to each other, "Hey, I didn't expect that the Chuanjian dragon sect was not so good. Yes, he died so tragically. TSK, it's a disgrace to our 6 sects. Come on, the Chuanjian dragon sect was powerful when it was in the hands of Qiu Chuji, but in the hands of Yin Jiping, Li Zichang, and the others, it's getting worse and worse." When the people of the Chuanjian dragon sect heard the cultivators of other sects ridiculing them like this, someone with a bad temper immediately shouted, "What are you talking about? Do you think your Jindan sect is so great? Doesn't your Jindan sect have Zhang Buduan and Bai Yuchan? Who else became famous in the world after that? If you're not convinced, come and fight. What are you talking about? And your Donghua sect, what nonsense are you talking about? Ning Chuanjian has been dead for almost 1,000 years, but I haven't seen any promising disciples. What right do you have to say such sarcastic words here?" The people of Jindan's sect were pointed at their noses and scolded. Immediately, someone retorted rudely, "Thieves of the Chuanjian dragon sect, what are you talking about?" The people of the Donghua sect also flew into a rage and retorted, "How dare you insult the ancestors of our sect? I'm not finished with you." Several people were quarreling. Seeing that the cultivators were about to fight among themselves, a young man suddenly said loudly, "Everyone, calm down." The man's voice was clear, and as soon as he spoke, he suppressed everyone's voices. Obviously, his cultivation was far higher than everyone else's. As soon as he spoke, the other sects also quieted down. The disciples of the Chuanjian dragon sect said loudly, "Zhenren Zhang, you are the youngest son of the leader of the Zhengyi school, and the Zhengyi school is the leader of the cultivation sects in the world. Please say something fair. This time, in order to encircle the Fox Zen school, our Chuanjian dragon sect gave us people and money. Just now, even the body of 12th junior brother was destroyed, but we ended up being criticized like this. Don't you think it's fair?" After he finished speaking, the cultivators of the other sects also shouted one after another, and the scene became chaotic. Zhang Tianhe stretched out his hands and pressed them around, and the cultivators closed their mouths again. Li Yunyang saw this and thought to himself, this person is very prestigious. Having a great father is really different. He glanced at Zhang Tianhe and saw that the man was tall and handsome. He could be considered a romantic and elegant man. When some of the female cultivators in this group looked at him, their eyes were full of admiration and love. Li Yundong's gaze moved from Zhang Tianhe to the side, and he immediately saw two familiar figures standing in the crowd. One of them was extremely beautiful, with a ponytail and a full forehead. Her eyes were bright, and she looked intelligent and proud. It was Ruan Hongling. Next to Ruan Hongling stood a woman in a purple gown. She was slim and graceful, like a crane among chickens. It was ZUON/OM/45278941954. Chapter 262. Go to watch net. After Zhang Tianhe suppressed the noise of the crowd, he said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, listen to me. All the major sects are gathered here today. This is a rare event in 100 years. As the saying goes, in the face of a great enemy, we should unite even more sincerely. Don't let others see us as a joke." Before he finished speaking, Yi Yu burst into laughter. "You so-called righteous sects are really dogs biting each other. I really don't know what your master was thinking, sending you kids here to die." Zhang Tianhe's face darkened, and he said in a cold voice, "Yi Yu, don't be arrogant. Today, I want to see just how powerful your seven-tailed divine fox's icy Vajra wheel is." As he spoke, he crossed his hands together, his right index finger and thumb constantly rotating the jade ring on his left thumb. His eyes were like lightning as he stared at Yi Yu. Watch net. Color * caret and text learn %super #speed. Update. Yi Yu could see that he had an extraordinary bearing. Before he even made a move, there was already an oppressive aura coming towards her. She was shocked and thought to herself, Zhengyi school is indeed a big sect that dominates the cultivation sects in the world. Zhang Tianhe is so young, but how can his cultivation be so strong? He seems to have reached the Yuanying realm. Truly amazing. Although Yi Yu was shocked, she was not afraid. She sneered and said, "Well, I want to see what the Zhengyi school is capable of." The two men's eyes met, and sparks flew in the air. Just as they were about to fight, a short man suddenly jumped out of the crowd and shouted, "Zhenren Zhang, let the Jinshan sect have this battle. We, the Jinshan sect, have suffered many casualties along the way. Just now, this evildoer killed 3 people. If I don't take revenge, I won't be able to answer to the sect leader when I get back." Zhang Tianhe looked at this person and hesitated. This person's cultivation is obviously not as good as Yi Yu's. If I go forward, won't I be courting death? As he hesitated, the short man from the Jinshan sect roared and rushed over. Yi Yu sneered. With a point of her finger, the cold and elegant Vajra wheel beside her whizzed over like a rapidly spinning sawtooth flywheel. However, when the short man saw that the chainsaw diamond wheel was about to fly in front of him and go straight for his neck, he shrunk his head and actually sank it into his chest, dodging the attack. The chainsaw diamond wheel that flew past quickly flew back, buzzing as it cut towards the crooks of his legs. The short man suddenly jumped, and both of his legs retracted into his body, leaving only his hands to crawl on the ground. His speed was surprisingly fast. The Vajra wheel missed twice in a row and paused in the air in surprise. Immediately after, it flew into a rage out of humiliation and pounced towards the 2 remaining hands of the short man. Watch net. 7 KOM. Unexpectedly, the short man, who had almost turned into a meatball, pushed off the ground with his hands and dodged the Vajra wheel. When he landed on the ground, both of his arms had shrunk back into his body. He had completely turned into a meatball. This time, not only did the cultivators on the field burst into laughter, but even Li Yundong, who was hiding in the dark and watching the battle, was stunned. What kind of kung fu is this? Is it the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? Li Yundong stared at the meatball rolling on the ground, unable to react for a moment. The cultivators from the other sects laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, what kind of cultivation method is this? Could it be a turtle hiding in its shell? Well, the Jinshan sect is really amazing. This kind of cultivation method is really an eye-opener. Good kung fu, good kung fu. Ordinary people really can't learn it. As they taunted and ridiculed him, Yi Yu also sneered and shouted, "Let's see what else you can turn into." As she spoke, the Vajra wheel suddenly pulled out an afterimage and cut towards the meatball like lightning. Its speed was even faster than before. However, to everyone's astonishment, the meatball bounced in place. When it fell again, it suddenly sank into the ground, and the cold Vajra wheel missed again. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't know where the short man of the Jinshan sect had gone. Yi Yu was also stunned, but as soon as she was stunned, a black shadow suddenly jumped out of the ground behind her. This black shadow was in the shape of a ball, but all of a sudden, its limbs and head stretched out and hugged Yi Yu tightly, making her unable to move at all. The short man laughed ferociously and said, "If you have the ability, kill me too." After that, he shouted loudly, and the muscles all over his body quickly swelled up. Like a constantly growing meat vine, he wrapped Yi Yu tighter and tighter. It seemed that she was about to be entangled to death. At this time, when everyone saw that the short man had suddenly turned the situation around, they all cheered, "Good, what a powerful earth escape skill." Yi Yu was shocked and angry. She shouted and her body shook. In the blink of an eye, the fur on her body grew rapidly. In just a moment, she had turned into a seven-tailed fox with fiery red fur. This fox was like a giant beast. The short man was originally hugging her tightly, making her unable to move. But at this moment, she suddenly revealed her true form. In an instant, the short man became a bug lying on the body of a cow, incomparably small. Watch net. 7 KOM. Yi Yu curled her tail and threw him heavily to the ground. Then, she slapped him fiercely with her claws. When the cultivators of the major sects saw Yi Yu's real body, they were shocked and angry. They shouted, "Stop!" But Yi Yu's claw landed on the short man's body, and in the blink of an eye, he was smashed into a mass of meat paste. Then, a short ghost flew out from under her claw, howling in horror and anger. Yi Yu sneered. He opened his bloody mouth and swallowed the short man's soul in one gulp. His teeth kept chewing, making cracking sounds that would make anyone's hair stand on end. It was not terrible to destroy a cultivator's body, but if a person's body and soul were destroyed, it would be an irreconcilable hatred. The disciples of the Jinshan sect suddenly burst into an uproar and shouted angrily, "Why do we care about the rules of Jianghu when dealing with such an evildoer? Go, kill this evildoer." After shouting, they all rushed forward. Some cultivators from other sects felt the same way and were filled with righteous indignation. They also roared and rushed forward one after another. Yi Yu's 7 huge tails swung violently, bringing with it a fierce gust of wind, forcibly sweeping all these people back. Li Yundong saw Yi Yu's tail swing, and a red light instantly covered her figure. When she turned around again, she had turned into a human figure in a Taoist robe. Seeing Yi Yu's courage, Li Yundong couldn't help but take a deep breath and think to himself, "This seven-tailed fox spirit is almost as powerful as Ao Wushuang. I'm afraid that a dozen cultivators will not be a match for this seven-tailed fox spirit." However, don't the leaders of the 6 great sects know that there is such a master in the Fox Zen school? Why did they send some young people to die? While he was wondering, Yi Yu swung her tail and sent these cultivators flying. She laughed proudly and turned to Lu Yi, the leader of the sect, who had been watching the scene coldly and silently, and said loudly, Shirbwa, you can rest assured now. The 6 great sects have no one to use, so they sent some useless kids. I can beat them alone. Humph, there's no need for that bitch Ao Wushuang to do it. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes, put his hands in his sleeves, and said in a deep voice, that's for the best. Humph, at such a critical time, I don't know where this girl has run off to. Yi Yu sneered and said, where else can she go? Of course, she ran away when she saw that the situation was not good. It was like this 10 years ago, and it will be the same 10 years later. She frowned and pointed at the cultivators of the various sects who had fallen to the ground. She shouted angrily, you so-called decent people broke into the gate of my sect and killed my disciples. Today, this place will be your grave. Yi Yu pointed at them, her fingers like swords, and said sternly, kill them. The chainsaw Vajra wheel beside her buzzed, streaked across a white light, and rushed toward these cultivators like lightning. One of the cultivators who had rushed forward had yet to get up from the ground. He watched in horror as the chainsaw Vajra chakram pounced on him. Just as he was about to close his eyes and wait for death, a yellow light suddenly flashed. A 3-foot-long sword emitting a golden stream of light blocked the chainsaw Vajra chakram. When Yi Yu saw that her powerful magical weapon had been blocked, she was shocked. She fixed her eyes on the sword and saw that there was a Big Dipper engraved on the sword. When it confronted the chainsaw Vajra wheel, the 7 stars on it flashed faintly. She was shocked again and cried out involuntarily, 7 stars sword. Many of the young cultivators of the surrounding cultivation sects had died under Yi Yu's chainsaw Vajra wheel. When they saw that the magical weapon had been blocked, they immediately cheered loudly, good job, Jinren Zhang. Demoness, look carefully. This is the supreme treasure of our Taoist sect, the 7 stars sword. It's far stronger than your broken iron wheel. Zhang Tianhe caught Yi Yu's magical weapon and said in a deep voice, Jinren Yi, please give me some advice. However, just as he was about to make a move, the cultivators of the surrounding sects saw that Zhang Tianhe's magical weapon and Yi Yu's were tangled together. They were most afraid of Yi Yu's fierce and domineering magical weapon. At this time, seeing that the magical weapon was entangled, they immediately knew that there was an opportunity for them to take advantage of. They all shouted, Jinren Zhang, what's there to talk about with demons and evil forces? Let's fight together. As they spoke, these people took out their powerful magical weapons one after another and attacked Yi Yu like a storm. No matter how powerful Yi Yu was, she couldn't block so many magical weapons. Her expression changed and she cursed angrily, a group of despicable people. We agreed to fight one-on-one, but now you're going back on your word. How shameless. Lu Yi, who had been watching from the side, also snorted and shouted angrily, sure, let's fight together. Do you think there's no one in our Fox Zen school? After saying that, his figure moved and he pounced over, standing side by side with Yi Yu. Mo Ashi, the eldest Shiji of the Fox Zen school, showed a strange smile. She slowly pulled out the golden hairpin from the crow and then moved to the side of Yi Yu and Lu Yi. Li Jiandong, who was hiding in the dark, saw it clearly. When he saw the golden hairpin, his heart suddenly shook. Isn't this the threaded hairpin of soul traversal that attacked me that night? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he saw Mo Ashi suddenly move. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal heavily stabbed the Zhaoqi acupoint on Yi Yu's back. At the same time, she hit the Zhaoqi acupoint on Lu Ye's back with her palm, sending him flying. This sudden change was so shocking that everyone on the scene could not react. Even the various celestial weapons that were attacking Yi Yu from the various sects could not stop, and they all shot towards Mo Ashi. Mo Ashi rolled up her sleeves, and a gust of strong wind blew over. Its power was even more violent than the one produced by Yi Yu's 7 tails. In an instant, these powerful magical weapons were bounced back. When Zhang Tianhe saw this scene, his eyes widened and he thought to himself, this gust of strong wind is powerful and soft. The purity of its shinchi is even dozens of times stronger than that of many inner disciples who started cultivating in their mother's womb. Obviously, only the orthodox Xian men can cultivate it. The people of the Fox Zen school can never cultivate it. Who the hell is this person? The people of the major sects widened their eyes and looked incredulously at Mo Ashi, the eldest Shiji of the Fox Zen school, who had suddenly attacked and injured her fellow disciples. They were all dumbfounded and speechless. The other disciples of the Fox Zen school were also stunned and cried out involuntarily, "Eldest Shiji, what are you doing?" Mo Ashi fiercely turned her head, and her body quickly turned into a green light, sweeping past them, either poking or poking. These people were already injured, and their skills were not as good as hers, so naturally they could not resist, and were all knocked down by her. For a moment, the entire Fox Zen school was wiped out, leaving only Mo Ashi standing proudly in the same place, laughing wildly. Yup, I've opened a thread in the book review section, and a lot of kids are actively commenting on it. Among them, Ayazhubaobi, Yuqinglei, Hihi Unspoken, Zhou Family Fox, and Girls Don't Cry were the most enthusiastic. Tang Tang, I'm going to seriously praise you. Yup, seriously praise you /om/45278941954. Chapter 263. Go to Watch Net. Mo Ashi suddenly knocked down almost everyone from the Fox Zen school, and no one present could react in time. Go to Watch Net. Ruan Hongling, who was in the crowd, was shocked. She pushed Zi Yuan's arm and whispered, "Sister Zi Yuan, look, isn't that the threaded hairpin of soul traversal that attacked you that night?" Zi Yuan stared at the field with sharp eyes, her eyebrows tightly knitted together. She said in a low voice, "Yes." Ruan Hongling asked in confusion, "Isn't she the eldest Shiji of the Fox Zen school? Why did she attack leader and Yiyu?" Zi Yuan raised her hand and motioned for Ruan Hongling to stop talking. Her eyes flickered as she said, "I don't know either, but I believe we'll get the answer soon." Mo Ashi stood in the middle of the field, looking down at everyone present. Most of the young cultivators of the major sects also looked at her in shock, as if they were looking at a lunatic. Yiyu's Zhaochen acupoint on her back had been pierced by the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, but she didn't fall for a while. She trembled all over and stared at Mo Ashi with her eyes wide open. She said in a trembling voice, "Are you crazy? Why did you attack me?" Mo Ashi laughed loudly, and her originally dignified and gentle expression became extremely surly. She said in a shrill voice, "I'm crazy? Yes, I'm crazy, but I think you're all stupid." As she spoke, her figure flashed and she quickly rushed in front of Yiyu. She suddenly turned her hand and slapped down on Yiyu's head. Yiyu barely managed to block it with her arm. With a crack, her arm was broken, and even her forehead was hit. She spat out a mouthful of blood and could no longer bear the shinchi. All the shinchi in her body was sucked away by the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. After a while, Yiyu, who had been majestic just now, was sucked dry in the blink of an eye. Even her soul couldn't escape. When the cultivators of the other sects saw this scene, their faces turned pale with horror. Some female disciples covered their mouths in fear and retched. A cultivator with a strong sense of justice shouted, "You evildoer, how can you not even let your own people go? You're so vicious." When Mo Ashi heard this, she turned her head abruptly and glared fiercely at the person who spoke. Her fierce gaze was like a sharp sword, instantly piercing the heart of the cultivator who spoke. It was as if he had been hammered by an iron hammer. With a cry, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His spirit immediately became dispirited, and he did not dare to look at Mo Ashi again. Watch Net. When the surrounding cultivators saw this scene, they suddenly burst into an uproar. They all glared at Mo Ashi, but did not dare to speak again. At this moment, Zhang Tianhe was even more shocked. He thought to himself, without a profound and orthodox Jinqi cultivation method, this glare can't have such power. Although the magic of the people of the Fox Zen school was very powerful, it was impossible for them to have such power with just a glance. Who was this person? Lu Yi was knocked to the ground by Mo Ashi's palm. He struggled to turn around and said in shock and anger, Mo Ashi, what are you doing? Mo Ashi walked over to Lu Yi and sneered, Humph, Shibua sect leader, what's wrong? Haven't you recognized who I am yet? Ah, by the way, I've been used to calling you Shibua sect leader for so many years. Alas, I can't even change it. Lu Yi was shocked. He said in a trembling voice, You're not Mo Ashi? Who the hell are you? Mo Ashi threw her head back and laughed. Lu Yi, oh Lu Yi, you call yourself the unparalleled divine fox, and you are so cunning. You didn't expect it, did you? The person closest to you has been deceiving you for 9 years, but you didn't find any clues. Ha ha ha, you should die in peace. As she said this, she shouted, Die, you old thing. If it weren't for you, how could I have ended up in such a miserable state? Mo Ashi pounced on him in an instant. Her fingers were like hooks as she stabbed at the top of Lu Yi's head. But at this moment, Lu Yi suddenly turned into a wisp of green smoke and quickly crashed into Mo Ashi's arms. His fingers quickly pointed at the Qihai acupoint on Mo Ashi's lower abdomen. Mo Ashi had never expected that Lu Yi would be able to fight back like this after her palm hit the Jiaoqi acupoint on his back. She was caught off guard and was immediately hit. With a loud shout, she retreated quickly, trying to escape. But how could Lu Yi allow her to escape? His figure chased after her like a shadow. He slapped Mo Ashi's lower abdomen, dantian, and his other hand heavily poked the huagai acupoint on her chest. Qihai, dantian, and huagai were the 3 vital parts of a person's chest and lower abdomen. If they were hit here, the qi of a person's body would be in chaos. Even if a cultivator had unparalleled magical power, he wouldn't be able to use it. Go to the internet. The 3 vital parts of Mo Ashi's body had been hit. Even if she was really an Iron Man, she would have turned into a pool of mud at this time. Mo Ashi didn't expect that the situation would suddenly turn around. She fell to the ground in shock and anger. She looked at Lu Yi angrily and said in a hoarse voice, It's impossible. I clearly hit your Jiaoqi acupoint, which is a fatal acupoint. Even if you don't die for a while, you can't fight back. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and stared at Mo Ashi. He took a deep breath and said slowly, Although I don't know who you are, I admire your means and your endurance very much. Colorful text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. I really didn't expect that there would be such a terrible opponent lurking around me all the time. It wasn't until you said that Ao Wushuang escaped by herself that I began to be on guard. Lu Yi put his hands behind his back, as if he didn't see the many cultivators not far away from him. He said to himself, You've been hiding for 9 years, and I've never found your flaws. But you never thought that you shouldn't have said that Ao Wushuang escaped by herself. I've watched her grow up. I know her temperament very well. Among the women in the world who value friendship and righteousness, there is probably no one who can surpass her. Therefore, she will do what she promised even if she dies. Anyone can escape, but she can't. Mo Ashi lay on the ground and glared at Lu Yi. Even so, I obviously hit your Jiaoqi acupoint, but how could you act as if nothing had happened? Lu Yi laughed and said, I've already been on guard against you. How could I not be prepared? Moreover, although you have been lurking in our Fox Zen school for as long as 9 years, you have never expected that after we foxes cultivate into human form, one of the biggest characteristics is that our acupoints can be transferred. Mo Ashi's face suddenly became extremely ugly. She smiled grimly and said, "Well, Lu Yi, you old fox, you're awesome. But don't be complacent. Ao Wushuang is in my hands. I've already sealed her. Even if you die, you can't save her. Moreover, it won't be long before your fate will be no better than hers." When Lu Yi heard that Ao Wushuang had been captured, his expression suddenly changed. He shouted sternly, "Where did you take her? Tell me, who the hell are you? If you don't tell me, I'll destroy your body and soul and make you unable to live forever." Mo Ashi raised her head and let out a shrill laugh. "You? Who do you think you are? I am an inner disciple of the Xianmen sect. How could I be afraid of your threat? You are too naive." "What? You are an inner disciple of the Xianmen sect? You are." Lu Yi was shocked. He took 2 steps back in horror and cried out involuntarily. Zhang Tianhe, who was not far away, also clapped his hands and said in a deep voice, "As I expected, this person is indeed one of us. Before I came here, I heard that a senior had planned the siege of the Fox Zen School. I didn't expect her to be a spy of the Fox Zen School. She has been planning for 9 years. Her forbearance and perseverance are really admirable. Amazing, really amazing. I just don't know which sect she is from." As he spoke in a deep voice, Mo Ashi suddenly raised her head, opened her mouth, and let out a shrill howl. A burst of cyan air suddenly burst out of her mouth, which quickly flew into the air and turned into a beautiful female young spirit with fluttering clothes. The woman said with a fierce look on her face, "Lu Yi, don't be complacent too early. As long as your Fox Zen School is not destroyed, I will never give up." There were cultivators who didn't know this woman, and they all exclaimed in shock, "Yang spirit, this person has actually cultivated to the Yang spirit phase." When Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling saw the female Yang spirit, they shouted in horror at the same time, "Second Shibua." When Lu Yi saw the woman, he was also shocked. He said loudly, You are Yen Fong of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school. 9 years ago, you came to my sect to fight for the whereabouts of Ao Wushuang. I drove you out, but I didn't expect you to turn into a Mo Ashi and have been lurking by my side. Good method, good method. What did you do to Mo Ashi?" Yen Fong laughed in the air and said, "Her? She has been reincarnated a long time ago. Does she know whether to be a human or a beast in this life?" Lu Yi was furious and shouted, "Our sect has no grudge against you. Why are you so ruthless?" Yen Fong said sternly, "No grudge? If it weren't for that bitch Ao Wushuang from your sect who stole my eldest Xixiang, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Humph, let me tell you, I must let Ao Wushuang taste what I have tasted. I will make her beg for death." Lu Yi was furious. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw Zhang Tianhe's figure move, and the 7-star sword in his hand was buzzing with a dragon's roar. Zhang Tianhe cupped his hands and said lightly, "I'm sorry, Senior Lu. This is an elder of my Zhengyi school. Forgive me for not allowing you to offend her." At this time, Li Yundong, who was hiding in the dark, came to his senses in shock. In an instant, he had figured out almost everything, and all his doubts in the past had been integrated. But what Li Yundong didn't understand was why Yen Fong of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school wanted to attack him. Logically speaking, he had no grudge against her. Why did she want to make trouble for him? This thought lingered in Li Yundong's mind. While he was thinking about it, he saw Yen Fong laugh and turn into a blue light. She quickly swept over Mo Ashi's body, took a small purple bell, and then quickly left. When Lu Yi saw the small bell, his body suddenly trembled and he shouted, "Put down the emperor's clock." After that, he jumped up and chased after her in the air. Suddenly, he felt a burst of sword chi stabbing at him from behind. Lu Yi immediately stopped, took out a jade opium pipe from his sleeve, and tapped it on the long sword that was coming at him from behind. With a clang, the long sword trembled violently and bounced back with a buzz. Lu Yi was also shocked by the powerful and mighty aura of the Xianmen sect in the long sword, and his whole body was numb. Then Zhang Tianhe appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye, slapped him with his palm, and shouted, "Go down." Lu Yi had no choice but to stretch out his palm, and his body was immediately blasted down. Zhang Tianhe was also blasted far away. His body flew backward in the air for a long time before he stopped. Zhang Tianhe was shocked in his heart. This old monster is really amazing. He fought head-on with the 7 stars sword and my palm, but he was still able to beat me so far away. Lu Yi was slapped back to the ground by Zhang Tianhe. When he looked up at the sky, Yan Fang's figure had already disappeared. Seeing that he couldn't catch up with her, he suddenly became furious. His beard spread out, and white qi rose from the top of his head, transforming into the appearance of a 7-tailed fox in the air. It looked fierce and terrifying. Zhang Tianhe flew back to his original place and said loudly, "Be careful, everyone. This old man is going to fight with his life. Group 1 2 3 4 5 is full. Don't join it. If you want to join the group, please add group 6, 1263623228. Ahem, if you have an account in other groups, don't join the group again. Leave some space for the new students /om/45278941954. Chapter 264. Go to the watch net. The cultivators of various sects took out their powerful magical weapons one after another. For a time, all kinds of powerful magical weapons were everywhere in the air. Go to the watch net. Colorful, text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. Lu Yi was surrounded by enemies, but he was not afraid at all. The 7-tailed divine fox he had transformed suddenly opened its mouth and roared at these cultivators. This roar was really terrifying. The mountain seemed to be shaken by this roar, and the surrounding air was also trembling violently. Li Jiandong was not the one being hit by it, but he still felt a sharp pain in his eardrums. His whole body trembled, as if he had been hit in the chest by someone. Li Yundong didn't bear the brunt of it, but he still felt a sharp pain in his eardrums. His whole body trembled, as if he had been punched in the chest. His blood and qi were boiling. If it weren't for the fact that his Niden had been tempered into steel, this roar would have immediately destroyed his soul. After Lu Ye's roar, many of the cultivators of various sects with lower cultivation immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Some cultivators with weak minds and unstable nadens were even shaken to the point that their spirit and flesh were separated. Their spirits left their bodies and screamed in horror in the air. Although the powerful magical weapons of some cultivators among them were powerful, no matter how powerful they were, they still needed to be driven by people. However, at this time, they were all shaken by Lu Ye's roar, which made them feel uneasy. The qi in their bodies was in a mess, which immediately caused their powerful magical weapons to droop from the air, like frosted eggplants. Zhang Tianhe had built up a solid foundation since he was young. His body swayed slightly, and his complexion changed drastically a few times, from white to red, from red to white, and finally back to normal. Zhang Tianhe took a deep breath and was shocked in his heart. The Fox Zen school is really like a centipede. Lu Yi, the leader, looks like a skinny old man. How could he be so powerful? If he pounces on us at this time, we will definitely suffer heavy casualties. Zhang Tianhe made up his mind and shouted, "Don't be so arrogant." After that, he rushed over in a flash. After Lu Ye's illusion made this earth-shattering roar, his illusion also disappeared. The wrinkles on his face had deepened, as if he had consumed a lot of jinqi just now. When he saw Zhang Tianhe pouncing over, he didn't stand on ceremony and greeted him with a cold smile. For a moment, the youngest and most promising disciple of the Zhengyi school and the most cunning leader of the Fox Zen school were fighting each other. Suddenly, two beams of cyan light were entangled in the field. The Seven Stars sword and the jade opium pipe in Lu Ye's hand were also entangled. It was really a powerful magical weapon against a powerful magical weapon, and a cultivator against a cultivator. The two groups fought fiercely, and sparks flew everywhere. For a moment, whether it was Li Yundong or the cultivators of the various sects, none of them dared to blink. They took a deep breath, lest they missed a second and the outcome of the battle would be decided. Watch Net. 7 KOM. It was the first time that Li Yundong had seen such a battle between cultivation masters. As a bystander, he could naturally see the advantages and disadvantages of the two people more clearly. In his opinion, Zhang Tianhe's Zhenqi was strong and pure, worthy of the words orthodox Xianmen. Every move was methodical, calm, and rigorous. Moreover, he had many magic. From time to time, he would release an earth magic or wood magic to harass Lu Yi. Once Lu Ye's movements were affected, he would immediately slap him with an amazing momentum. Lu Yi was agile and slippery. There were several times when Zhang Tianhe was about to hit him, but he slipped away. He was worthy of being called an old fox. He had consumed a lot of Zhenqi with his previous roar. At this time, when he fought with Zhang Tianhe again, he slowly fell into a disadvantageous position. However, he was experienced and could always avoid heavy attacks in incredible places. Li Yundong nodded secretly when he saw this and understood something in his heart. The cultivators of the other sects on the sidelines were also whispering to each other and commenting on the situation on the field. Eldest Xixiang was commenting on the battle between the two of them to his junior brothers and junior sisters, and how they could learn from each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses. At this time, a clear voice suddenly rang out in the field. "Master, how powerful do you think this old fox Lu Yi is?" "I don't think so. Wasn't he beaten to the point of being unable to fight back by a guy with a hairless mouth?" This sentence offended both the Fox Zen school and the Zhengyi school at the same time, so it immediately attracted everyone's attention. Li Yundong, who was hiding in the dark, also looked over. His eyes suddenly widened and his heart shook. Ding Nan? Why is she here? Is she also a cultivator? No way. Ding Nan was dressed in ordinary clothes and was very fashionable and beautiful. She was very eye-catching among this group of cultivators. It seemed that she didn't see the gazes around her, and there was a meaningful smile on the corner of her mouth. She said, "Master, don't you think so?" Beside her stood a short old man with a ruddy complexion. He was Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Yinyang sect. Among the cultivators of these sects, he was one of the few elders. This time, when he heard that the 6 great sects were besieging the Fox Zen school, he had brought Ding Nan along to join in the fun. After Ding Nan and Zheng Yuan returned to the mountain, she had lied that after she had occupied this body, the soul of the original owner had resisted so fiercely that her divine sense had been damaged in the battle and she couldn't remember many things clearly. Zheng Yuan did not doubt her and firmly believed her, so he answered whatever Ding Nan asked. When Zheng Yuan heard Ding Nan's words, he laughed and said, "You can't say that. Lu Yi, that old fox, is very powerful. Look at his heaven and earth jasper pole. It's a good treasure. It can't be destroyed by swords and spears, and it can be invaded by water and fire. It specializes in pointing at people's vital acupoints. As long as it is pointed, the yin and yang qi will immediately rush in, making you beg for death. Go to the watch net. 113 Shui 4 net. As for the 7 stars sword, it's even more powerful. This is the powerful magical weapon of the Zhengyi school. Together with the Xianyuan sword, the Sanhuang sword, the 4 immortal killing swords, and the Bahuang and Liuhe sword, it is known as the 5 famous swords in the cultivation world. Just from its name, you can tell how powerful it is. Zheng Yuan said with confidence, although the heaven and earth jasper pole and the 7 stars sword are fighting fiercely, this is not the main battlefield. The real battlefield is a contest between people. Although you saw that Lu Yi was suppressed by Zhang Tianhe, in fact, it was because they restrained each other. Just now, when Lu Yi, that old fox, roared, how many people vomited blood? If I hadn't protected your heart meridian, I'm afraid that your soul would have been destroyed. Zhang Tianhe has been cultivating since he was in his mother's womb, and it has been 20 years since then. His internal strength and jinqi of the orthodox Xianmen sect naturally restrained the demon aura of these evil spirits. Hey, the Zhengyi school is really amazing. It seems that Zhang Tianshi of the Zhengyi school has a successor. While the two of them were talking, the situation between Lu Yi and Zhang Tianhe suddenly changed. Lu Yi had been slapped on the back by Yan Fang. Although his vital acupoints had not been hit, he had more or less been injured. Just now, he had roared and consumed a lot of jinqi. In addition, his natural aura had been restrained by Zhang Tianhe. The more he fought, the more uncomfortable and anxious he became. Lu Yi gritted his teeth and, at the risk of being hit on the shoulder by Zhang Tianhe, he swung his elbow at Zhang Tianhe like a steel whip. Zhang Tianhe quickly retreated like smoke. Lu Yi took this opportunity to retreat to the other people of the Fox Zen school who had been knocked out by Yan Fang. His fingers flew, waking them up one by one, and he said loudly, "Get up. Today, our Fox Zen school is facing a great disaster, so we should fight side by side. Everyone." Before he could finish his words, his chest suddenly shook. Now the door of the treasure of the Fox Zen school was open to them. If they didn't take advantage of it now, when would they? A cultivator jumped out and shouted, "Why should we show mercy to these demons and ghosts? These evildoers killed so many of our fellow disciples just now. Big guys, let's go." After saying that, he took the lead and pounced on them. Although some cultivators of the decent sects felt that it was unfair and cruel to fight in front of them, they hesitated for a moment. However, there were also some cultivators who had been persuaded by this person. They moved and pounced on the people of the Fox Zen school. When Li Yundong hadn't known that Mo Ashi was Yan Fang, he had thought that someone in the Fox Zen school wanted to harm him. Now that the knot in his heart had been untied, he was worried about Su Chan's whereabouts, and he couldn't bear to see these so-called righteous people bullying the weak. At this time, he couldn't bear it anymore and immediately jumped out. Just as these cultivators were about to cross the yin-yang pattern in the field, a huge black shadow suddenly pounced on them. The strong wind was fierce and clanging. Before it got close, they felt a sharp pain as their skin was being cut. These cultivators were shocked and retreated at the same time. With a loud bang, they saw that the ground of the yin and yang pattern had been cut by a large black iron fan, forming a deep and long straight line, connecting the two cauldrons at the yin and yang points. The cultivator at the front only saw a black shadow appear in front of him, and then a fist was getting bigger and bigger in front of him. With a puff, he was sent flying far away. This change caused an uproar among the crowd. They focused their eyes and saw a young man standing in the middle of the field with an imposing appearance. He looked at them coldly and said, "So many people beat up an old man and a group of women. Aren't you ashamed?" When these cultivators saw that the young man had jumped out of some crack in the stone, they all shouted angrily, "Brat, who do you think you are? Get out of here, lest I beat you up. Where did this little B***** come from? Get out of here, or else my sword will be blind." The young man was looking at them coldly when he suddenly shouted, "Hey!" This mantra caused the hearts of everyone present to tremble. Suddenly, thousands of Buddhist chants rang out in their minds, buzzing chaotically. For a moment, everyone shut their mouths. Zhang Tianhe was shocked. He cupped his hands and said solemnly, "I wonder which master has come here. please tell me your name." The young man cupped his hands coldly and said in a sonorous voice, "I'm Li Yundong." Well, let me say a few words. Well, I admit that I did want to write about the siege of Guangming Peak because I liked it so much. However, the original draft was about the 8 sects besieging the Fox Zen school, but I later calculated that among the existing cultivation sects in the world, apart from the Zhengyi school, I couldn't count 8 famous cultivation sects, so I had to narrow it down to 6. As for Mo Ashi and Chen Kun, they were definitely coincidences, and the later ones were different. Don't mess it up. Li Yundong was Li Yundong, and Zhang Wuji was Zhang Wuji. /OM/45278941954 Chapter 265. Go to watch net. As soon as Li Yundong appeared, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. The other disciples of the Fox Zen school looked at the young man in surprise. Some of them saw the big black iron fan that had fallen not far from Li Yundong and immediately exclaimed, "The fan of 7 treasures." What? Lu Yi, who was on the verge of death, suddenly became energetic. His eyes lit up, and his body, which had collapsed on the ground, also sat up. Watch net. Although Lu Yi was old, his cultivation quotient was profound after all. He was stabbed in the chest and didn't die for a while. He stared at the big iron fan beside Li Yunyang with his eyes wide open and said in a trembling voice, "It's really the fan of 7 treasures. Could it be?" A disciple went up to support him and asked in surprise and joy, "Could it be what?" Lu Yi didn't say anything at this time. He stared at Li Yunyang without blinking. His face was ruddy, and his eyes were full of excitement. He didn't look like the old man who had almost died just now. Not far away, the cultivators of the major sects also saw the fan of 7 treasures beside Li Yunyang at a glance. Some of them immediately recognized it and shouted in surprise, "It's the treasure of the Fox Zen school, the fan of 7 treasures." This shout caused an uproar among the crowd. This time, they had come to besiege the Fox Zen school. Firstly, they had been instigated by Yan Feng in private. Secondly, it was because Ao Wushuang had stolen the Renyuan Jin Dan, which had given the major sects a pretext and an opportunity to attack. Thirdly, they had come to rob the various powerful magical weapons of the Fox Zen school. Among the various powerful magical weapons of the Fox Zen school, the fan of 7 treasures was undoubtedly the most tempting. But they never imagined that such a top-notch magic weapon that everyone wanted would actually fall into the hands of this young man. For a moment, the male cultivators of the major sects looked at the fan of 7 treasures beside Li Yunyang, and their eyes turned red with envy. Ruan Hongling, who was in the crowd, pulled Zi Yuan's sleeve with a look of excitement and surprise. She said softly, "Sister Zi Yuan, look, this guy is very impressive." There was both surprise and worry in her eyes. She shook her head secretly at Ruan Hongling and sent a voice transmission to her, "Don't talk. The people next to us will hear us. If they hear us, I'm afraid they will think that we are colluding with the Linggong sect and the Fox Zen school." Watch net. Ruan Hongling made a face at Zi Yuan and said via voice transmission, "Sister Zi Yuan, do you think that our Linggong sect is not in cahoots with the Fox Zen school?" The cultivators of the major sects suddenly burst into an uproar and cursed angrily, "F***CK, you little bastard, what kind of bullshit are you talking about? Brat, if you have the ability, come out and fight me one-on-one. If I don't beat you until you call for your mother, I'll change my surname to yours. This guy must be a genius of the Fox Zen school. Just look at the fan of 7 treasures he's holding. Why are you talking about morality with him? Let's fight shoulder to shoulder with our powerful magical weapons and smash him to death." Zhang Tianhe looked at Li Yundong with awe. Although he couldn't see through Li Yundong's strength, he secretly felt that this young man's cultivation was probably not lower than his. Zhang Tianhe cupped his hands and said, I don't know what your relationship with the Fox Zen school is, but I can see that your cultivation is excellent. Just now, when you called out the name of Buddha, it contained the beauty of the orthodox Buddhist mantra. Obviously, you are also the descendant of a famous teacher. I still advise you not to get involved in this mess. Otherwise, if you associate with a dirty sect like the Fox Zen school, you will be cursed in the cultivation world for the rest of your life. Li Yundong looked at the cultivators who were cursing and sneered. He said to Zhang Tianhe, who looked like a leader, I just want to ask you one thing. Did you see a very beautiful girl named Su Chan on your way here? Before Zhang Tianhe could speak, he suddenly heard a man who was like an iron tower jump out of the crowd and say loudly, Zhenren Zhang, you are too polite. Why are you so polite to this kind of evil demon? He is obviously a genius of the Fox Zen school. The man was wearing a shirt with his chest exposed, revealing a palm-sized piece of heart-protecting hair. His skin was dark, and his face was quite ugly. He was about 1.9 meters tall, like a black bear standing upright. Holding a pair of golden melon hammers in his hands, he pointed at Li Yundong and said loudly, Hey, little bastard, remember, I am Kuang Tianping of the Donghai sect, known as the Golden Hammer Immortal. Let me tell you, I've killed a lot of beautiful girls from the Fox Zen school along the way, but I don't know if there's anyone named Su Chan. I'll send you down later. You can ask her, won't you? These words made Li Yundong's heart burn with anger, and his eyes gradually revealed a murderous look. He said coldly, I will ask you again, have you seen Su Chan? Does anyone know where she is? Kuang Tianping spat on the ground and said loudly, F***ck, even if there is, I will rape and kill her first. What do you want? If you are not convinced, come and hit me. Su Chan was Li Yundong's weakness, and he couldn't stand people saying such things. As soon as he heard it, he lost control of his emotions. Li Yundong's eyes suddenly turned blood red. He burst into a rage and shouted, You are courting death. He was so scared that his body froze in front of Li Yundong, and he was so stunned that he even forgot to hit the next blow. Li Yundong grabbed Kuang Tianping's head, lifted him up with a grim smile, and asked in a grim voice, I'll ask you again, have you seen Su Chan's whereabouts? Only then did Kuang Tianping come to his senses. He refused to admit defeat and shouted, F***ck, that girl was killed by me. What are you going to do about it? Kill me if you have the guts. Li Yundong's face was ferocious. If you want to die, then don't blame me. After that, Li Yundong squeezed his 5 fingers. /OM/45278941954. Chapter 266. Go to watch net. After saying that, Li Yundong exerted force with his 5 fingers and crushed Kuang Tianping's head like a watermelon. For a moment, red and white blood splattered everywhere. Kuang Tianping's soul instantly left his body and fled to the back of the crowd, swearing profanely. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Color * and text learn %super #speed. Everyone present was stunned and stared at Li Yundong. Some female cultivators covered their mouths in horror and turned their heads away. Zi Yuan couldn't help frowning and sending a voice transmission to Li Yundong, Li Yundong, don't kill too much. Su Chan is not here. I've already checked for you, but I don't know where she is. Hurry up and ask Lu Yi, the leader of the Fox Zen school, if he knows. When Li Yundong heard Zi Yuan's voice transmission, he was stunned, and the anger in his chest immediately dissipated a lot. He looked at Zi Yuan in the crowd and nodded secretly. Then he snorted coldly, pointed to the deep and long line drawn by the fan of 7 treasures in front of him, and said coldly, anyone who crosses this line will die. After that, he turned his head and walked toward Lu Yi. With every step he took, his body made a crackling sound, and he quickly changed back to his original shape. Seeing this scene, Yuan Hongling was curious and puzzled. She sent a voice transmission to Zi Yuan, "Sister Zi Yuan, what kind of cultivation method is this? Why is it so strange? I've never seen it before." Zi Yuan also frowned slightly and said, "I don't know either. I've never seen such a cultivation method before. However, I've heard that there is a cultivation method that can stimulate the greatest strength and potential of the human body after changing blood, flesh, bones, and internal organs. It can increase one's metabolism by dozens or even hundreds of times in an instant. When one cultivates to a certain realm, cultivators can control the changes of their bodies at will. Not only can they suddenly grow taller and bigger, but they can even have 3 heads and 6 arms." Yuan Hongling was shocked and said, "Is there such a magical cultivation method? What kind of cultivation method is this?" Zi Yuan said, "The heavenly Jindan technique." Yuan Hongling was shocked again. The heavenly Jindan technique? Hasn't it been lost for generations? Then how did this guy know it? Zi Yuan also shook her head and said, "I don't know either. I'll ask when I have the chance." While the two of them were secretly transmitting their voices, the cultivators of the other sects were also whispering to each other in shock, secretly guessing what kind of cultivation method Li Yundong had used just now. It was so domineering. Li Yunyang turned around and took a few steps. He saw a man jump out of the group of cultivators. Although he was not as burly as Kuang Tianping, he was not short either. He roared loudly, "You murderer, return my Shixiang's life to me." It was this kind of internationalism that could be used to force them to attack one by one. After Li Yundong figured this out, he walked to the front of the line, cupped his hands to Zhang Tianhe and the people of the other sects, and said in a deep voice, "You are also the descendants of the famous righteous sections. Why did you bully the old and the weak with numbers?" Li Yundong's words stood at the highest point of morality and condescendingly condemned these people in front of him. Of course, the disciples of the major sects would not accept it and retorted loudly. However, just now, Li Yundong had taken the lead by making a show of strength and ruthlessly killed 2 people in a row, which had given them a great shock. For a moment, no one dared to speak ill of him. "Where did you come from? What do you know? The Fox Zen school is an evil sect, and everyone has the right to punish it." "That's right. Why are you reasoning with demons and ghosts? We are enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. You are so unreasonable. The Fox Zen school has committed all kinds of evil deeds, but you are here to stand up for them. Do you want to help the evildoers?" Li Yundong heard it clearly and immediately retorted loudly, "Then I would like to ask you, what evil deeds has the Fox Zen school done?" Although his voice was not very loud and he did not shout, Li Yundong was full of zhenqi. When he spoke, it was as if he was speaking in people's ears. Although the crowd was noisy, they could still hear him clearly. Not a single word was drowned out by the noise of the crowd. At this time, all the cultivators present suddenly froze. They knew that this could not be achieved without hard and solid basic cultivation. They all thought to themselves, "This young man was cruel and fierce just now, but how did he cultivate such a solid zhenqi cultivation method at such a young age? Could it be that this person is the direct disciple of some hidden great master?" Among them, there were quick-witted and knowledgeable cultivators who immediately thought about which powerful masters were living in seclusion in the cultivation world. Then, they compared the young man in front of them one by one. Li Yundong's question made everyone a little speechless. Some of them immediately thought to themselves, "Yes, except for the mystical silver fox, the Fox Zen school, I haven't heard of any evil deeds. They must have behaved improperly, but there have been many cases of male thieves and female prostitutes in various sects. There must be some small evils in the Fox Zen school, but they were not enough to be destroyed. However, they had never heard of any great evils. More people's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Enforcing justice on behalf of heaven? Everyone has the right to punish them? It's all bullshit. In the name of asking for Renyuan Jin Dan, they are here to take advantage of the situation. The secret manuals and powerful magical weapons of the Fox Zen school were what they wanted. However, the elders of the major sects were too embarrassed to do this kind of thing. They were too thick-skinned to do it, but they were also unwilling to let go of the Fox Zen school, which was a big fat piece of meat. Therefore, an idea came to their minds. Let the younger generation go. Not only will they be able to practice their cultivation quotient, but they will also be able to go down the mountain to cultivate. Moreover, if there is any dispute at that time, they can say, it's all children's business. Children are not sensible. This plan was very cunning, so this time, the major sects were unwilling to fight with all their strength. Previously, when the Fox Zen school was about to fall and had no ability to resist, everyone had naturally rushed forward. However, when they saw that someone had killed 2 people in a row, the major sects had to weigh the pros and cons. Is this a fat piece of meat that can be swallowed immediately or a hard bone? I don't want to lose 2 teeth before I get to eat the meat. Seeing that they were at a loss for words for a while, Li Yundong immediately continued, since the Fox Zen school doesn't have any evil deeds, why are you so ruthless? Could it be that they had to be ruthless just because they were foxes that had cultivated to become spirits? There are countless evil humans in this world. You don't care about them, but you want to make things difficult for a group of foxes who don't do evil. Tell me, are you worthy of the 4 words righteous sects? Li Yundong's words were so powerful that some cultivators with a sense of justice from various sects looked ashamed. Some cultivators who were greedy for the powerful magical weapons of the Fox Zen school saw that the situation was not good and immediately shouted, Ao Wushuang, a disciple of the Fox Zen school, sneaked into the Gazao sect to snatch the Renyuan Jin Dan. We are here to seek justice for this matter. When Li Yundong heard this, he burst out laughing, /OM/4527894194. Chapter 267. Go to watch net. The cultivators of the various sects saw Li Yundong laughing. His laughter sounded harsh, arrogant, and full of disdain. They all said angrily, B****, what are you laughing at? Are you looking down on us? Li Yundong stopped laughing and said loudly, then may I ask everyone, what evidence do you have to prove that Ao Wushuang stole the Renyuan Jin Dan? May I ask where the owner of the Gazao sect is? When the cultivators of the major sects heard this, they were all speechless and looked at each other. F***ck, after Ao Wushuang stole the Renyuan Jin Dan, sect master Wan Zhenyuan disappeared, and no one else could be found. How can we find the owner? Seeing that they were speechless, Li Yundong said loudly, since the owner of the Gazao sect hasn't stood up to speak, why are you shouting and fighting here? Is the cultivation world similar to the underworld? Even the underworld has rules and reason. Could it be that you guys are worse than hooligans? The cultivators of the major sects were angry. Some of them said in a low voice, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you compare us to hooligans? Are you tired of living? B****, which sect are you from? Don't you want to stay in the cultivation world? Zhang Tianhe frowned when he heard Li Yundong's sharp words. He made an obeisance by cupping his hands and said, Zhenrenli, I very much disagree with what you said before. Go to watch net. The cultivation world has free rules and regulations. This time, the 6 sects besieged the Fox Zen school. It was a righteous matter with reason and evidence. You can't slander it like this. Li Yundong immediately asked, you said that it was reasonable. Where is the evidence? Where is the reason? Zhang Tianhe said in a deep voice, Ao Wushuang sneaked into the Gazao sect and stole the Renyuan Jin Dan. At this time, everyone in the world knows about it. Is everyone here lying? Are all the cultivators in the world lying? As soon as Zhang Tianhe's voice fell, the cultivators of the various sects began to clamor. Zhenren Zhang is right. Well said. That's right. So many people know about it. How can this matter be fake? For a moment, the crowd was excited. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling looked at each other worriedly, worried that Li Yundong would not be able to deal with the excited crowd. Watch net. Hongjianoam at this time, Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how to deal with it, but he heard a woman's voice transmission say to him, my shimmy was expelled by the leader 10 years ago, so what she did has nothing to do with the Fox Zen school. Zhenrenli, you can tell them about it. When Li Yundong heard this, he knew what was going on. He suddenly raised his head and laughed. Ridiculous, how ridiculous. His laughter was so loud that it suppressed everyone's voices in the blink of an eye. Zhang Tianhe said with a hint of anger, what's so funny? Li Yundong sneered and said, even if Ao Wushuang stole the Renyuan Jin Dan, she was expelled from the Fox Zen school 10 years ago. Isn't it ridiculous for you to blame what she did on the Fox Zen school and come here to fight and kill her? As the saying goes, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. In the name of seeking justice for the Gazao sect, you have started a massacre here. I think it's not true that you are looking for the Renyuan Jin Dan, but that you are trying to take advantage of the situation. Are all the major sects such bandits? Zhang Tianhe said angrily, Zhenrenli, I respect you a little because I see that you are an orthodox Xianmen Kung Fu master. If you continue to slander me like this, don't blame me for being rude to you. Li Yunyang said without showing any weakness, Zhenren Zhang, the Zhengyi school is the leader of the Taoists in the world. I respect you because you are the youngest son of Celestial Master Zhang. If you continue to speak without any evidence, just based on your assumption, and only based on public opinion, don't blame me for being rude to you. Zhang Tianhe had been cultivating in the mountains since he was a child. It could be said that he had been born with a golden spoon in his mouth. He had been extremely respected since he was a child. When had he ever quarreled with anyone? Not to mention arguing with them in front of so many people. For a moment, he was so angry that his Taoist heart was in a mess. He said angrily, why do I have no evidence? Why do I take it for granted? Why do I have to take it for granted? Li Yundong laughed, spread out one hand, and said, you said that the Renyuan Jin Dan was stolen by Ao Wushuang. Then, may I ask, where is the Renyuan Jin Dan now? As soon as he finished speaking, Ruan Hongling, who had been watching the scene, couldn't help but burst into laughter, causing the surrounding cultivators to glare at her unhappily. Go to the internet. Hongjianoom Yuan also grabbed Ruan Hongling's arm and glared at her secretly. She said to her via voice transmission, are you crazy? What are you laughing at? Aren't you afraid of being found out by others? Ruan Hongling lowered her head and tried hard to hold back her laughter. She said via voice transmission, Sister Zi Yuan, I'm laughing at how shameless Li Yundong is. It's obvious that the Renyuan Jin Dan was swallowed by him, but he wants us to take out the Renyuan Jin Dan. How dare he speak so eloquently? How shameless. Zi Yuan looked at the scene and unconsciously revealed a smile on her face. She said via voice transmission, he is the most shameless person. While the two of them were talking in private, the other cultivators around them had already begun to make a ruckus. What? You're asking us where the Renyuan Jin Dan is? Be ***, if we want the Renyuan Jin Dan, why are we here? Why are you wasting time with this guy? Let's kill him together. Zhang Tianhe was infuriated by Li Yundong's shameless question. He said angrily, you are the one who is really unreasonable. How can we take out the Renyuan Jin Dan? Li Yundong said loudly, that's right, you can't take out the Renyuan Jin Dan. You said that Ao Wushuang took the Renyuan Jin Dan, but where is she? Ao Wushuang has been taken away by Yen Fang. You should at least find Yen Fang and ask her to release Ao Wushuang and then confront her. Otherwise, just based on your empty words, you can be convicted. Wouldn't that be child's play? The cultivators of the major sects were already furious. They had never seen such a troublemaker before. How could he ask them to find Yen Fang? Damn it, who knew where this crazy woman had gone? The world was so big. How could they find her? Even if he went to look for it and found it, how long would it take? By that time, the Fox Zen school would have long since disappeared. Li Yundong's words made Zhang Tianhe's thoughts a little chaotic. Before he could speak, he saw a tall man walk out of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect and say loudly, Zhenren Zhang, please let me say a few words. Zhang Tianhe turned his head and saw that it was the eldest Shixiang of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect, Du Fei, who was known as the Jade Face and Golden Monkey. He cupped his hands and said, so it's Zhenren Du please. Du Fei came to the front of the crowd, pointed at Li Yundong, and shouted, my shitty told me that when you went up the mountain, you once teamed up with Lin Yu of the Immortal Fist sect and killed several outer disciples of our Chuanzhen Dragon sect. Is that true? Li Yundong snorted and said in a deep voice, I didn't do anything. It was Lin Yu who killed them. It has nothing to do with me. Du Fei said sternly, where is Lin Yu now? Li Yundong thought to himself, he's dead. But he said, how would I know? Du Fei pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, you're lying. My shitty saw you leave with him. It's obvious that you're in cahoots with him. How could you say that you don't know? Do you think I'll believe you? Li Yundong laughed and said, I have a grudge against Lin Yusu. We've fought several times. How could I be in cahoots with him? More than one person knows about this. If you don't believe me, you can ask Zhenren Ruan Hongling of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school. After he finished speaking, all eyes fell on Ruan Hongling. Ruan Hongling was watching the fun. She had never expected that Li Yundong would bring the matter to her. She immediately cursed in her heart, but she had to say, yes, I can testify to this. Although she was young, she was a member of the Zhengyi school and had a strong background. No one doubted her words, but some suspicious people muttered to themselves, how did she know? Seeing that Ruan Hongling had admitted it, Du Fei frowned and decisively gave up on this matter. She only smiled slightly, but she was so beautiful that all the male cultivators present held their breath in an instant, for fear of disturbing this otherworldly beauty. /OM/45278941954 Chapter 268 Go to Watch Net. Zhang Tianhe looked at Zi Yuan, his eyes full of amazement and admiration. He formed a palm with one hand and said, Amitba. Zhenren Zi Yuan, please. Zi Yuan walked up to the crowd and said in a clear voice, thank you for allowing me to speak in front of everyone. Go to Watch Net. 113 Shui, 4 Net. An admirer in the crowd immediately said loudly, Zhenren Zi Yuan, you can keep talking if you want. We're happy to listen. As soon as the man finished speaking, the crowd burst into laughter. Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said calmly, just now, I saw that you were arguing with Zhenren Li and decided to decide this matter by winning or losing, but have you thought about it? How should we decide the outcome? Are we going to swarm them all at once? Or should we take turns? Someone in the crowd shouted, if we rush up together, even if this guy is really an immortal, he will be squeezed to death by us. Zi Yuan nodded and said with a smile, that's right. This will ruin the reputation of our major sections. If word gets out that so many of us have joined hands to bully one person, it will be a joke. After she finished speaking, someone else immediately replied, Fairy, you're right. If so many of us go up together, we'll be giving him too much face. Zi Yuan smiled and said, but if we take turns one by one, there are more than 100 of us here. How long will it take to fight? Are we going to set up a stall here and fight on the field while we eat and sleep off the field? Everyone burst into laughter, and Li Yundong couldn't help but chuckle. He said, I don't think you brought any dry food. Don't eat up Mount Tianlong and leave only a pile of yellow and white things. There's no need to fight anymore. It stinks to death. After he finished speaking, the people on the field laughed even harder. For a moment, the tense atmosphere dissipated a lot. Zi Yuan glanced at him, but the smile on her face was pulled down. She said with a frosty face, You're just a nobody. How dare you interfere in the affairs of so many sects? Do you really think you're the Jade Emperor? If you really want to stand out, then let me tell you, we have so many sects here, can you handle them all? Although he knew that she was acting, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, Damn, this fairy sister changes her face so fast. Li Yundong cupped his hands and said loudly, I, Li Yundong, am willing to fight with anyone from the major sects. As he spoke, he pointed at the line drawn by the fan of 7 treasures and said, As long as I can cross this line, I lose. When everyone heard this, they immediately burst into an uproar. Each of them thought, this kid is too arrogant. He actually drew such a rule. Isn't it easy to cross this line? Furthermore, he didn't say how he would win. Could it be that he was so confident? Seeing that Li Yundong had made this rule, Zi Yuan was slightly stunned, and then quickly cast him a look of admiration. She thought to herself, he's smart. He knows not to kill too much, so as not to make too many enemies in the future and make it difficult for him to do anything. Watch net. 7 KOM. Zi Yuan was very cooperative and said, Since Zhenrenli has made this rule, we will accept it. What do you think? As she spoke, she turned around. The cultivators who admired her from the major sects all shouted, Zhenren Zi Yuan, whatever you say. Zi Yuan said again, Since it's a fight, even if it's a gentle fight, there's a possibility of injury and death. What do you think? She then said, Since it's a fight, even if it's a gentle fight, there's still a possibility of injury and death. This is the so-called fists and feet have no eyes. There have been too many killings today. Why don't we each elect a person with the strongest cultivation method to compete? If he loses, he will automatically withdraw. What do you think? Some of the more experienced and prudent people faintly felt that something was wrong, but they couldn't tell what was wrong. After all, they didn't believe that this nobody could defeat so many people here alone. They pondered for a while and didn't speak for a while. Zi Yuan turned her head and said to Zhang Tianhe, What do you think, Zhenren Zhang? Zhang Tianhe knew that although it was nominally the 6 great sects besieging the Fox Zen school, in fact, more than a dozen sects had come. Of course, he didn't believe that Li Yundong could challenge more than a dozen people by himself. He said with a smile, That's just right. It'll save us from being talked about. As he said this, he said to Li Yundong, Did you hear me clearly? Li Yundong smiled slightly and didn't waste any time. He cupped his hands and said, Who's first? Du Fei of the Chuanjin Dragon sect immediately jumped into the field and sneered. I'll do it. Boy, today I'll show you the power of our Chuanjin Dragon sect. Du Fei was dressed in a tang suit. He shouted and swung his arm. With a whoosh, a Jingu bang came out of his sleeve and hit the ground with a thud, causing the ground to tremble slightly. Du Fei took a deep breath and bent his body. He pressed one hand on the end of the stick and the other on the 7-inch part of the stick. He was quite tall and his arms were very long. When he stretched out his body, he really stretched out his arms like an ape and was eager to try. Li Yundong saw that the tip of the Jingu Bang was shaking slightly, like a poisonous snake that could attack at any time. He was secretly shocked and his eyes fell on the other side's shoulder. His feet were standing on the edge of the long line, motionless. Seeing that Li Yundong was standing behind the long line, Du Fei narrowed his eyes slightly. When he opened them again, his eyes were shining brightly. With a loud shout, he swung the Jingu Bang in his hand. In an instant, the Jingu Bang grew nearly 1 or 2 meters long. It became like a huge iron hammer, fiercely smashing toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong was suddenly shocked. He grabbed the fan of 7 treasures beside him, turned around, and dodged the stick. Then, he lifted his hand and knocked the Jingu Bang away with a clang. These 2 weapons were both magic weapons made of black iron, which were heavy and heavy. When they collided, the buzzing sound shook the eardrums of everyone present. Du Fei's stick was knocked away, and he immediately turned over. As he turned over, the Jingu Bang suddenly became shorter and hid behind him, making it impossible for people to know where his next blow would come from. Go to the net. 7 KOM. Color * caret and text learn % super #speed. Li Yundong saw a burst of golden light coming toward him. Without thinking, he immediately shook his wrist and opened the fan of 7 treasures in his hand, blocking in front of him like a solid iron wall. Li Yundong saw a burst of golden light coming toward him. Without thinking, he immediately shook his wrist, and the fan of 7 treasures in his hand opened with a swoosh, blocking in front of him like a solid iron wall. Du Fei's move was evolved from the back spear move. It was extremely stealthy, and the Jingu Bang in his hand could be short or long, big or small. With this move, countless cultivators had been defeated by this move. It could be said to be his proud killer move. But Li Yundong didn't care about reason at all. He didn't care where it came from or where it was going. He just blocked an iron wall in front of him, completely blocking his body, and easily blocked the blow. Du Fei was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He thought to himself, this guy's powerful magical weapon is so overbearing that I have to divert it. After thinking about it, he suddenly threw the Jingu Bang in his hand into the air. The Jingu Bang jumped into the air and attacked Li Yundong from all directions. After this powerful magical weapon launched an autonomous attack, although its power was far less than when it was in Du Fei's hand, its dexterity was a little faster. Moreover, it came and went like lightning, and the attack was like a tide. It was so fast that people could not react to it at all. Li Yundong was a little tired of dealing with it. After blocking a few times, Li Yundong simply threw out the fan of 7 treasures in his hand. For a moment, the fan of 7 treasures was like a flood dragon entering the sea. It immediately rushed toward Du Fei's Jingu Bang aggressively. The 2 magical weapons were fighting fiercely in midair. A golden light and a black light were tangled into a ball, clanging sounds and sparks flying everywhere. Du Fei saw that Li Yundong had thrown out the powerful magical weapon in his hand. Seeing that Li Yundong's hands were empty and there was no powerful magical weapon to resist, he was overjoyed. He quickly pinched his fingers and shouted, "Go!" With a whoosh, a 3-foot-long sword flew out from behind him. It broke through the air, fast and fierce. When it first flew out, it was just a sword, but when it flew in the air, it changed into 2, and then 4. When it fell, it had already covered the area 7 or 8 meters around Li Yundong, as if it was raining swords. The disciples of the Chuanjian dragon sect all cheered and said loudly, "Senior brother Du, what a good move, flying swords like rain. Good job." Those from other sects who were knowledgeable also secretly nodded and thought, although the Chuanjian dragon sect has gone from prosperity to decline and is far from as glorious as when Qiu Chuji was the leader, a centipede dies but never falls down. There are still some good people in the sect. Li Yunyang saw such a terrifying sword rain falling on his head, and the fan of 7 treasures was entangled by the opponent's powerful magical weapon. Although he could retreat to avoid it, once he retreated, the opponent would immediately come forward and cross the long line, and he would lose. Seeing that the long sword was about to pierce through him, Li Yundong suddenly took a step forward and jumped to a place 4 or 5 meters away. He suddenly raised the 2 three-legged bronze tripods placed in the yin-yang Tai Chi pattern that weighed 1,000 pounds. As soon as he lifted the bronze tripod, he heard a clanging sound above his head. Obviously, the sword rain above his head had been blocked by the big bronze tripod. Everyone on the scene was shocked to see that Li Yundong had such great strength. He had raised the big bronze tripod to block the attack that could be said to be a sure hit. Seeing that he had been blocked by Li Yundong, Du Fei was angry. Just as he was about to pinch his fingers to drive the flying sword again, Li Yundong suddenly waved the bronze tripod and slapped its abdomen with his palm. With a clang, the ash that had accumulated in the bronze tripod, which was more than a foot thick, suddenly sprayed toward Du Fei like a sharp arrow. Du Fei was caught off guard. He only had time to hold his breath and close his eyes. Immediately, he turned into a gray man. For a moment, the scene was filled with smoke and dust, and the cultivators around covered their noses and dodged to the side. Du Fei waved his sleeves and brushed away the ash in front of him. When he opened his eyes, he suddenly took a deep breath. He was shocked to see that Li Yundong had thrown the bronze tripod, which weighed more than 1,000 pounds, at him. At this time, the cultivators behind him were all shocked and scattered to both sides like birds and beasts. After Li Yundong threw out a big bronze tripod, he immediately jumped to the side of another big bronze tripod and kicked it in the abdomen, sending it flying into the air. Then he pounced on Du Fei. Chapter 269. Go to watch net. The copper cauldron that Li Yundong had thrown into the air hit the ground with a muffled thud, and everyone's hearts trembled. Go to watch net. 7 KOM 11 3 Shue 4 net. The cultivators of the major sects looked at Li Yundong with their mouths agape, as if they were looking at a monkey who had jumped out of a crack in a stone. They couldn't understand where this guy had come from and how could he be so powerful. After a long time, some of them came to their senses. They took a deep breath and exclaimed, "Amazing! Which sect is this guy from? Why haven't I heard of him before? Strong, he's really strong." Some young cultivators who were not very experienced in fighting whispered to each other, "This person is really amazing. Could it be that he was born with divine strength?" Some older and more experienced Shixiang and Shiji took the opportunity to say to their junior brothers and sisters, "There are almost no cultivators in this world who are born with divine strength. You see, his strength is great because his cultivation is deep and his foundation is solid. The qi all over his body is condensed into steel, so his jinqi is vigorous. It's impossible to pick up such a heavy thing with human strength alone, let alone lifting it as if it were light. You must wrap this cauldron with jinqi, then mobilize the qi of your kidneys and liver, and activate the power in your body. Only by combining the two can you do it." The young cultivator suddenly understood. "So that's how it is. It doesn't seem difficult. In this case, I can also do it." The older cultivator said earnestly, "There are many people who can do this, but there are very few who can fight back and control the enemy at that moment. Look at Li Yundong. He was in a place where he was almost doomed to die, but he knew how to adapt to the local conditions and use the local materials to turn defeat into victory. This is amazing ability." The cultivators of the various sects were whispering to each other. Ruan Hongling couldn't help tugging at Zi Yuan's sleeve and whispering, "Sister Zi Yuan, this guy has become so powerful. He's so strong, even stronger than before." Zi Yuan's expression didn't change, but there was a gratified look in her eyes. She looked at the field and said in a low voice, "He has passed the divine tribulation. Naturally, he will soar into the sky and amaze everyone. I believe that after this battle, the name Li Yundong will become famous in the cultivation world." Wan Hongling was envious and jealous. She looked at Li Yundong with admiration and jealousy. She pouted and snorted. "Let's see if this guy can survive the next round of battles." At this time, Li Yundong walked back to the long line he had drawn before. He cupped his hands and said in a clear voice, "I was lucky to win just now. I wonder who wants to give me some advice in the next round?" As soon as he spoke, the whispers in the hall immediately stopped, and everyone looked at each other in dismay. Watch net. Colorful articles. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New originally, some young and vigorous cultivators who thought that they were good wanted to step forward, but when they saw the fight between Li Yundong and Du Fei, they immediately became cowards and refused to go out. As for some other very powerful and experienced cultivators, they secretly muttered to themselves, wondering if they should go out and fight. It would be good if they won, but if they lost, they would be unable to raise their heads in the future. It would be a big loss. For a moment, all the sects were a little timid, but then they saw a tall and thin man walk out. The man was wearing a wide and long Taoist robe and a necromancer's hat on his head. His eyebrows were long and thin, and the corners of his eyebrows were raised. The corners of his mouth were drooping, as if his mother had just died, and his face was full of sadness. He was holding a wooden sword in one hand, and his whole body was like a kite in the wind, waiting for a gust of wind to blow him away. The man walked to the field, cupped his hands, and said, "I'm Zhao Wuji from Fangzhen sect." Before he could finish his words, the cultivators of the major sects on the field suddenly burst into laughter. Fangzhen sect? What kind of sect is this? I've never heard of it. Zhao Wuji, what a scary name. Hey, man, is your wooden sword okay? Is it a peachwood sword? You should go catch ghosts and draw talismans. Don't embarrass yourself here. Zhao Wuji ignored them and said slowly to Li Yunyang, "Zhenrenli, I don't have much ability. Only the wooden sword in my hand is a powerful magical weapon that can barely be seen. I also know that I'm not a match for you. Why don't you let my Dharma treasure fight against your Dharma treasure? Whoever's Dharma treasure wins. How about it?" Before Li Yundong could say anything, the cultivators of the other sects burst out laughing. "Brother, are you kidding me? Take your broken wooden sword and fight with the fan of 7 treasures. In my opinion, this wooden sword will break in less than 2 rounds. Li Yundong heard the ridicule of the crowd, but he saw that Zhao Wuji didn't take it seriously at all. He was secretly shocked and thought, if he doesn't have 30%, he wouldn't dare to go up to Liangshan. This person must have something up his sleeve. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay." After that, he threw the fan of 7 treasures into the sky. Watch net. 7:ko/ The fan of 7 treasures suddenly jumped into the air, and with a swoosh, all the leaves opened. The golden Sanskrit characters on each leaf emitted a dazzling golden light, which was dazzling even in broad daylight. Zhao Wuji saw the fan of 7 treasures emitting a golden brilliance in mid-air, as if it was inviting him to fight. He also took a deep breath and muttered something. He put his finger in his mouth and bit hard. After biting the tip of his finger, he smeared the blood on the wooden sword. In an instant, the wooden sword suddenly came to life and began to wriggle, as if it was desperately sucking Zhao Wuji's blood. Zhao Wuji's face became more and more miserable, and his 2 eyebrows drooped even more. Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua, was the oldest cultivator here, as well as the most experienced and knowledgeable cultivator. When he saw that the sword was sucking blood, he suddenly cried out in horror, "Jiuyin locust wood sword. The cultivators who were close to him turned their heads to look at him, as if they didn't understand what kind of powerful magical weapon the Jiuyin locust wood sword was. Ding Nan was very good at reading people's expressions, so she immediately asked obediently, "Master, what is the Jiuyin locust wood sword? I've only heard of peach wood swords, but I've never heard of locust wood swords. Can locust wood also be used to make magical weapons?" Zheng Yuan was very satisfied with Ding Nan's cleverness. He glanced at her and thought to himself, Pinger has become a lot smarter after returning from the dead in this body. Zheng Yuan stroked his beard and said, "Why do you think peach wood swords can be used to make long swords, and many Taoists use them to catch ghosts?" How could Ding Nan know this? She was afraid that she would be exposed, so she deliberately acted like a spoiled child and said, "Master, don't keep me guessing. Just tell me directly." Zheng Yuan liked her trick very much. Without suspecting anything, he said, "Because peach wood is a natural young object, and ghosts are in things in the world. Naturally, one thing can restrain the other. Therefore, peachwood swords can be used to restrain otherworldly items. But locust wood is different. Locust wood is a natural young object." Ding Nan asked in confusion, "Why is that?" Zheng Yuan was a prideful person. At this time, he only cared about showing off. He thought that Ding Nan was deliberately asking this to cooperate with him. He didn't expect that she really didn't know. He laughed and said, "Think about it. What is the word ghost next to the tree? It's the word locust on the locust tree. Ghosts are the most in the world, and they like to stay in places the most. Locust trees are naturally in, so ghosts are often accompanied by locust trees, making them even more in. This Jiuyin locust wood sword can not only absorb ghosts for its own use, but also constantly absorb people's yang qi to feed the ghosts in the sword. Look at Zhao Wuji, who is so thin and has a sad face. It's the result of the yang qi in his body being absorbed." Ding Nan was shocked and asked, "Then why does this person still use this magical weapon? Isn't he courting death?" Zheng Yuan laughed and said, "This Jiuyin locust wood sword is extremely domineering and powerful. If you get it, any ordinary cultivator can become a great master. How can it be so easy to give up?" As he was speaking, the 9-in locust wood sword in Zhao Wuji's hand had already absorbed enough fresh blood and yang energy. It suddenly let out a shrill and cold shriek, like the long cry of an owl. It was so piercing that it made everyone's hair stand on end, their hair standing on end. The 9-in locust wood sword struggled with all its might in Zhao Wuji's hand. It was like a crazed ghost that wanted to pounce on its target. The sight of it would make anyone who saw it feel a chill run down their spine. But Zhao Wuji still did not let go. Instead, he took another deep breath and blew it at the locust wood sword. Ding Nan saw the locust wood sword twisting like a snake, and ferocious faces constantly appeared on it. Although she was horrified, she still asked, "Why is he still breathing?" Zheng Yuan stroked his beard and nodded slightly. This Zhao Wuji knows the principle of starting with a drum of courage, weakening by the second, and exhausting by the third. He is quite clever. This principle is the same as cockfighting. The sharp-eyed cockfighting on his side is already eager to try, but he still refuses to let it go. Instead, he doubles down on it. Once it goes on the field, it will be unstoppable. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw that the fan of 7 treasures was a little impatient in the air, and the light emitted by the golden characters weakened a little. At this time, Zhao Wuji suddenly let go of his hand. The Jiuyin locust wood sword in his hand flew into the air like lightning and rushed toward the fan of 7 treasures. After the Jiuyin locust wood sword flew into the air, it constantly released grayish-black smoke. This smoke turned into ghosts and ghosts one after another, rushing toward the fan of 7 treasures like a tide. Some cultivators asked in confusion, "This fan of 7 treasures is a powerful magical weapon of Yang, and it also has the power of Buddha. Isn't it courting death if the Jiuyin locust wood sword attacks it with yin qi? Immediately, someone shook his head and said, as the saying goes, the devil is 10 times stronger than the Taoist. Yin and yang reinforce and subdue each other. It's not that yang can subdue yin, but yin can also subdue yang. It just depends on who has a higher level of cultivation and will win. At this time, everyone in the field raised their heads and watched the battle between the powerful magical weapons in the air. The fan of 7 treasures was suddenly attacked fiercely by the 9 locust wood sword. In its shock and anger, golden light shone brightly. Golden Sanskrit characters floated out one after another, forming a Vajra warrior with 3 heads and 6 arms. It fought with the many resentful ghosts. The Jiuyin locust wood sword was not to be outdone. The grayish-black smoke it released also condensed into a huge black Rakshasa with 3 heads and 6 arms. It held a trident and an alms bowl and fought with the Vajra again. Everyone in the field watched intently, afraid that the outcome of the 2 magical weapons, one yin and one yang, would be decided in the next second. Li Yundong also frowned slightly and clenched his fists. For a moment, the golden light and the black light twisted into a ball. In the beginning, the golden light on Tianlong Mountain was extremely dazzling, and sometimes it was covered with dark clouds. When the battle reached its climax, the 2 lights had already twisted together. There was no way to tell who was who. There was a black light in the golden light, and there was a golden light in the black light. The colors were strange, and it was difficult to tell who was who. After fighting for a while, Zhao Wuji suddenly bit his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood into the air. The Jiuyin locust wood sword, which had been fighting with the fan of 7 treasures, suddenly seemed to have gained an additional force. It suppressed the fan of 7 treasures, and the black Rakshasa beat the Vajra warrior until it was forced to retreat. At this time, Li Yundong frowned. The cultivators of the various sects also shook their heads and said, the fan of 7 treasures is going to lose. The yang qi is suppressed by the yin qi, so it will definitely lose, /om/45278941954. Chapter 270. Go to watch net. However, just as the yang qi and Buddhist powers of the fan of 7 treasures were suppressed by the yin qi and ghostly powers of the 9 locust tree wood sword, a black fog suddenly surged out of the fan of 7 treasures. At the same time, many ferocious and malicious ghosts pounced towards the Rakshasa to devour it. Go to watch net. 113 Learning 4 net. The black Rakshasa was momentarily unable to react. Its entire body was covered in a layer of thin and small malicious ghosts. It was like a lion with man-eating ants crawling all over its body. Immediately, it roared angrily. When the golden warrior of the fan of 7 treasures saw that the other party's attacks had stopped, it immediately counterattacked. It threw the Vajra in its hand at the other party. The black Rakshasa was originally on par with the golden warrior. Previously, it was because Zhao Wuji had suddenly used his blood to nourish the ghosts that the 9 locust tree wood sword had suddenly gained strength. It no longer held back as it attacked the other party, causing the golden warrior to retreat. However, such a thing could not happen again. When the ghosts refined by the fan of 7 treasures suddenly attacked, the black Rakshasa was immediately restrained. It was like an arrow at the end of its flight and could no longer fight to a draw with the golden warrior. Instantly, the situation was reversed. All the cultivators present were dumbfounded. No one could understand how a Dharma artifact like the fan of 7 treasures, which was dignified, had deep Buddhist powers, and extremely heavy yang qi, could refine ghosts and use them. Before long, the black Rakshsa's limbs and head were finally grabbed by the golden warrior's 6 arms. Then, with a forceful tug, it was torn into several pieces. The black Rakshasa also turned into countless vengeful ghosts that fled in all directions. The 9 locust tree wood sword was also sliced into 2 by the fan of 7 treasures. With a thud, it fell to the ground like 2 pieces of wood. At that moment, Zhao Wuji's expression was ashen as he laughed bitterly. "I've lost." With that, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell backward. A kind-hearted cultivator wanted to help him up, but Zhao Wuji staggered to his feet, pushed them away, and staggered away. For a moment, after watching Zhao Wuji leave, everyone looked at Li Yunyang in unison. They were secretly frightened in their hearts. The fan of 7 treasures is already an extremely powerful magical weapon, but it has refined the Yin soul chi. The masculine Buddhist power and the cold ghost power are like water and fire. I really don't know how Zhenrenli combined the 2 into one. Miraculous, truly miraculous. This time, the battle of magical treasures was like a war between 2 armies. From the beginning, they challenged each other, to probing each other, until they were evenly matched. Then, Zhao Wuji was in trouble, and the 9 locust tree sword gained the upper hand. Finally, the psychic fan of 7 treasures suddenly counterattacked from an impossible place, turning the tide of the battle. This was truly a series of twists and turns, incomparably thrilling. Some of the cultivators in the arena who only wanted to watch the show were greatly satisfied. Some of the older cultivators thought to themselves, if I had fought with Zhao Wuji just now, would my powerful magical treasure have been able to win? After thinking about it, they came to the conclusion that 9 out of 10 of them would not have been able to. They couldn't help but be more afraid of Li Yunyang, who had won. Li Yunyang had won 2 games in a row, but his face was not very happy. He cupped his hands to the crowd and said, "I was lucky to win another game. I wonder which master is willing to teach me." After he shouted, the cultivators of the various sects looked at each other, and no one spoke. "Go to the internet." Li Yundong shouted again. For a moment, no one answered except for his voice. Just when everyone was silent, a short bald man suddenly jumped out and shouted, "F***ck, I'll play with you." Li Yundong looked over and saw that the man was less than 1.6 meters tall. He was sturdy, like a weight that had become a spirit. Li Yundong cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Well, what should I call you?" The short bald man rubbed his shiny head and said loudly, "What do you mean by, Your Excellency? What era are you in? Why are you still speaking in such a genteel manner? I can't stand the way you speak. Listen carefully, I'm Dang Chong from the Penglai sect." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Well, please give me your advice." Dang Chong walked to a place not far from Li Yundong. As he rolled up his sleeves, he said in a loud voice, "Zhenrenli, I want to fight with you. You can't take advantage of me." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What did I take advantage of you?" Dang Chong pointed to the fan of 7 treasures on Li Yundong's back and said, "I don't have any powerful magical weapons like the fan of 7 treasures or the Jiuyin locust wood sword. I only have a pair of fists and a pair of feet. How about it, Zhenrenli, let's compete with our fists and feet. I won't use any powerful magical weapons, and you won't use any either. What do you think?" After he finished speaking, before Li Yundong could say anything, a disciple of the Fox Zen school who was not seriously injured shouted, "You shameless baldy. You don't have any powerful magical weapons, but our Zhenrenli does. Are you going to let him have powerful magical weapons and not use them? That's right. You're so unreasonable. Zhenrenli, don't be fooled by him." For cultivators, powerful magical weapons were weapons. If they fought with others without weapons in their hands, they would most likely be at a disadvantage. Even the cultivators of the other sects showed disdain on their faces. They thought to themselves, "This baldy is so shameless. How dare he use words to mock Li Yundong?" However, Li Yundong was proud of his powerful martial arts, so he smiled confidently and said, "Well, I'll fight with you. After saying that, he put the psychic fan of 7 treasures behind him and patted the end of the fan with his palm. With a thud, the psychic fan of 7 treasures sank into the ground like a pile driver. Li Yundong walked to the long line between the 2 big copper tripods and stood still. He cupped his hands and said, "Please." After that, he put down his hands and didn't make any gestures. He just fixed his eyes on Dang Chong. Go to see net. 7 KOM. Dang Chong saw that Li Yundong was standing in an unkempt manner, but his posture was as steady as a mountain. He had the bearing of a grandmaster. Dang Chong suddenly touched his forehead in surprise and said loudly, "That's strange. You're so young. How did you practice kung fu? Did you start practicing in your mother's womb? Hey, who is your master?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Do you want to fight or not?" Seeing that Li Yundong was unwilling to tell him, Dang Chong smiled, stood up, and said loudly, "Boy, be careful." After that, he suddenly exerted strength under his feet and threw a blast punch at Li Yundong. Li Yundong saw that although his punch was powerful and heavy, it was not as good as Lin Yu's. He didn't take the opponent's move and punched at the opponent's shoulder. Relying on his longer arm, he actually arrived first. Unexpectedly, just as Li Yundong's fist was about to hit the opponent, Dang Chong suddenly rushed in front of him, opened his mouth, and spat out a fireball, heading straight for Li Yundong's face. Li Yundong was caught off guard. If it weren't for the great increase in his cultivation and the improvement of his foresight and divine sense, his face would have suddenly gone numb the moment Dang Chong opened his mouth. He subconsciously lowered his head, and Li Yundong would have been hit at this time. Li Yundong only felt the back of his head heat up, and the fireball flew past his head. He could even smell the burning smell of his head. Li Yundong was furious. Although he had lowered his head and exposed the back of his head and back to his opponent, he stood on one leg and smashed his other leg like a steel whip in front of Dang Chong, like a scorpion swinging its tail. With a snap, Li Yundong's foot firmly stamped on Dang Chong's face. Dang Chong saw that Li Yundong had dodged his extremely hidden attack and was about to chase after him again, but he was suddenly slapped in the face. He immediately took 2 steps back, wiped his face with both hands, and shouted, "Damn it, what's going on?" At this time, everyone in the field came to their senses. The disciples of the Fox Zen school hissed, "The Penglai sect is so shameless." Good lesson. The Fox Zen school had originally been full of yin and yang. There were many female disciples and few male disciples. Now that the only remaining fake male disciple, Gu Feng, had been killed by Lu Yi, when these women shouted, they were like cheerleaders, and their voices were extremely harsh. The male cultivators of the major sects had strange expressions on their faces. They muttered to themselves, "This guy is really lucky with women. When the time comes, these fox spirits will be taken into the sect together. Won't they be happy? No, we can't let this guy take advantage of us like this." Ruan Hongling, who had been full of excitement and joy when she saw Li Yundong win, heard the loud shouts of the female disciples of the Fox Zen school, and her face immediately fell. She snorted and said, "What are you shouting for? A group of demons of the Fox Zen school are born to attract bees and butterflies." At this time, Li Yundong also pointed the incense stick in his hand at Dang Chong and said in a deep voice, "Do you admit defeat?" Dang Chong wanted to bite the bullet and say that he would not admit defeat, but he saw that Li Yundong's eyes were sweeping over his lower body, and the incense stick in his hand was also swaying in the direction of his lower body. He suddenly shivered and thought to himself, "It's okay to have a few burns on the top of my head, but if there are also a few burns on the bottom, how can I be a man?" Dang Chong immediately cupped his hands with an apologetic smile and said, "Zhenrenli, good kung fu. I'm convinced." After he finished speaking, he walked off the stage. As he walked, he touched the scar on his head and gasped. Li Yundong threw away the incense stick in his hand and walked back to the long line. He cupped his hands and said loudly, "Who else?" At this time, if Li Yundong counted the 2 people he had killed before, he had already won 5 games in a row. The methods he used to win each game were different. There was the magical heavenly Jindan technique, magical weapon fighting, close combat, and even the Buddhist Mahamudra Kung Fu. The cultivators of the various sects present felt that Li Yundong was like a huge treasure vault, with endless means that he had not used yet. What was terrifying was that this young man was too strong on the spot. They really didn't know whether he was using it regularly or just normally. When Li Yundong first appeared, everyone was still full of disdain, especially when he had first challenged the major sections. The cultivators of the major sects had disdained to break through the long line drawn by Li Yundong. Instead, they had chosen to fight him head-on and defeat him head-on. The pride and conceit of the righteous sects deep in their hearts could be seen from this. However, after Li Yundong won a few games in a row, his momentum soared, and everyone was more and more in awe of him. A few cultivators from the 6 sects who were on good terms with each other secretly whispered to each other. One of them, who was taller, whispered, "This monkey's son is really powerful. Do you have a chance of winning if you fight him head-on?" The others shook their heads. The tall one said in a low voice, "Since he said before that we would lose if we fight in the long line, then let's take turns to attack him. I don't believe that we can't break through that long line if we take turns." After he finished speaking, someone next to him hesitated and said, "But if we win in such an unfair way, it won't sound good in the future." The tall one sneered and said, "There's no one who can defeat him now, and you're still thinking about this. Do you want the limelight to be stolen by this guy? At that time, if Zhenren Zhang of the Zhengyi school takes action, our 6 great sects will have nothing to do." His words immediately moved the others. They looked at each other and nodded to themselves. The tall one was overjoyed and said, "Then I'll take the lead. Let this guy have a good look at the power of our 6 great sects together, /OM/45278941954. He screamed in pain, "Stop hitting, I admit defeat, I admit defeat." Li Yundong snorted, then with a kick of his toes, he flipped the big copper tripod over, and it fell to the side with a thud. But before he had time to speak, he suddenly saw a figure jump out of the field and say quickly, "Chen Anji of the Donghua sect, please advise me." As Chen Anji spoke, he had already rushed near the long line. Although it was a legitimate duel, in reality, it was no different from a sneak attack. Watch net. 7 KOM. Color * caret and text learn %super #speed. Update. Without thinking about it, he immediately made a Mahamudra with both hands and slapped it hard on the big copper tripod, making it fly toward Chen Anji like a cannonball. Chen Anji was very afraid of Li Yundong's speed, so he stayed very far away from Li Yundong, almost sticking to another big bronze tripod. However, when he ran to the front of the big bronze tripod and saw that he could step on the line with one more step, the big bronze tripod that Li Yundong had blasted over smashed over like a cannonball. At this time, if Chen Anji took another step forward, he would immediately be sandwiched between the 2 cauldrons and be smashed into a meat patty. Chen Anji had no choice but to stop in his tracks. But as soon as he stopped, Li Yundong immediately arrived like a shadow. He waved his hand and grabbed Chen Anji's face. Chen Anji quickly pinched a paper talisman and pointed it at Li Yundong. Quick! The talisman instantly burned by itself. Soon, many grasses and vines grew under Li Yundong's feet, tightly wrapping around his legs. Li Yundong sneered and shouted loudly. The 9 revolutions Xinqi in his body suddenly exploded, and his legs suddenly doubled in size, breaking the vines. Chen Anji was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. Before he could react, Li Yundong's palm pounced on him and sent him flying like a kite. Li Yundong sent Chen Anji flying with a palm. As soon as he turned around, he saw a figure quickly pouncing on the other side of the long line. The previous 2 times, someone had introduced himself. Even if it was Chen Anji's sneak attack, there would be a cover. But this time, not only did he introduce himself, he directly launched a sneak attack. Li Yunyang snorted coldly. He patted one side of the 2 large bronze tripods that were lying flat in front of him. A huge force shook the other large bronze tripod and sent it flying, smashing toward the person who had sneaked up on him. Li Yundong had used the same trick again. He had thought that the opponent would stop, but he hadn't expected that the opponent would not slow down at all. Moreover, when the big copper cauldron hit the opponent's figure, it went straight through. Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, is this a Yin spirit? The opponent actually used such a sinister technique like the Yin spirit projection to barge into my line of defense. How shameless! Li Yundong was furious. A stream of qi rushed from his lower abdomen to his chest, and then from his chest to his throat like a torrent. He opened his mouth and let out a shocking roar. Bang! This loud roar had an extremely strong effect of Buddhist mantra. The man's Yin spirit was instantly dispersed, and he disappeared at the edge of the long line in an instant. Watch net. But after Li Yundong's roar, another figure appeared near the long line. The man saw that Li Yundong was far away from him, and he was out of reach. He was in midair, and he only needed to step on the long line to win. He immediately laughed wildly and said, I won. After that, he stepped on the ground. Li Yundong's Jinqi immediately surged out like a mountain torrent. He roared and slammed his palms on the ground, causing the blue bricks on the ground to surge like waves. His Jinqi forcibly controlled the blue bricks on the ground and pulled them back like a carpet. When the man's feet landed, he had stepped steadily on the long line drawn by Li Yundong on the ground, but suddenly the ground surged, and the long line under his feet was forcibly pulled back half a meter. The man had no time to react. When his feet landed on the ground, the long line was half a meter away from him. This distance seemed close, but in his heart, he felt that it was far away. Just as he was shocked, Li Yundong suddenly appeared in front of him, pushed him with his palms, and shouted, "Get out of here." After that, he pushed him away like a cannonball. The man fell into the crowd and only stopped after knocking down several people. He got up angrily and shouted, "You're shameless. Why did you pull this long line?" Li Yundong snorted, sneered, and said disdainfully, "I don't know which sect you are from. Which sect did the previous one belong to?" The subtext of Li Yundong's words was obvious. How dare you say that I'm shameless? You are much more shameless than me. The man's face turned red. Only then did he know how to be ashamed. He cupped his hands and said, "Well, you win. Our Qingwei sect admits defeat." As he said this, he didn't even bother to say his name and got into the crowd. From the four people's joint attacks to Li Yundong resolving them one by one, it actually took less than a minute. The means used by the cultivators of the four sects were unscrupulous, which could be said to be incredible, but Li Yundong's way of dealing with them was even more stunning. It wasn't until Li Yundong confronted the disciples of the Qingwei sect that they came to their senses. Their faces were full of shock. Some cultivators couldn't care less about their hostility and couldn't help cheering loudly, "Good." This cheer shook the sky, but it was from the sincere admiration of a cultivator from the bottom of his heart. This battle was really as fast as lightning. It was so fast that it was dizzying, and they were so nervous that they couldn't breathe. The remaining disciples of the Fox Zen school looked at Li Yundong's back and secretly took a deep breath. "Chao Yi, who was ranked 6th, said to Lu Yi excitedly, "Shibua, what is his relationship with Su Chan? What is his relationship with Ao Wushuang? How can he be so powerful?" Lu Yi stared at Li Yundong. He was also so excited that his eyes were shining, as if he had forgotten his serious injuries. He said, "I don't know, but I guess they should be very close." Chao Yi pulled Lu Ye's sleeve and whispered, "Shibua, you have to find a way to keep this person." Lu Yi smiled but didn't say anything. At this time, Li Yundong cupped his hands again and said, "Who else wants to go up?" At this time, he had defeated 7 people in a row. Every match was dazzling and convincing. For a moment, the 6 major sects and the other small sects that came to take advantage of the situation were silent. Some cultivators even had the faint intention to leave. However, some cultivators who were greedy for the treasures of the Fox Zen school were unwilling to give up and said to Zhang Tianhe of the Zhengyi school, "Zhenren Zhang, are we going to sneak back like this? Zhengyi school is the leader of the cultivation world. If you can't beat them, we will be convinced." Zhang Tianhe saw that everyone was looking at him. Although he was very afraid of Li Yundong's amazing talent in fighting and profound cultivation, when he subconsciously glanced at Zi Yuan, he suddenly found that Zi Yuan was not looking at him like everyone else. Instead, her eyes were fixed on Li Yundong in the arena. Zhang Tianhe had been very attentive to Zi Yuan before, but he had never gotten a smile from her. But at this time, she was moved by Li Yundong. Zhang Tianhe's heart suddenly burned with jealousy. He no longer hesitated. With a cold snort, he stepped forward and said loudly, "Zhang Tianhe of the Zhengyi school of the Shangqing sect. Please enlighten me, /OM/45278941954. Chapter 272. Go to watch net. As soon as Zhang Tianhe entered the arena, all the cultivators' hearts tightened. Go to watch net. This was because the reputation of the Zhengyi school was too great. Zhang Tianhe was the youngest son of the leader of the Zhengyi school and also the last disciple. Naturally, his kung fu and magic were nothing to scoff at. Is the Xianmen sect more powerful, or is this nameless kid who came out of nowhere more powerful? All the cultivators had the same thought running through their minds. Zhang Tianhe pinched his fingers and slowly stroked the blade of the 7 stars treasured sword in his hand. He quickly calculated the situation on the battlefield. Just now, he had rushed out on his own. But when he came to the field and faced Li Yundong, he suddenly calmed down. Based on the strength that Li Yundong had shown just now, it would be a lie for Zhang Tianhe to say that he was confident of winning. There were only a few aspects to a fight between cultivators. The first was their physical strength. It depended on whose cultivation was deeper, which was also to see whose internal strength was deeper. However, having a deep internal strength was not enough. One had to have Taoist magic, which was the specific way to fight. It depended on who knew more Taoist magic, who knew more Shentong magic, and who could use it more exquisitely. The physical strength that Li Yundong had shown just now was extremely shocking. Not only was his jinqi vigorous, but it was also extremely condensed. It was obvious that he had put in a lot of hard work in his cultivation, especially when he had controlled the blue bricks on the ground to move back half a meter like dragging a carpet. This was absolutely impossible to do without an extremely powerful and condensed jinqi. The second was their powerful magical weapon. A good magical weapon was enough to make an ordinary cultivator become a famous master in the world. Zhao Wuji, who held the 9-yin locust wood sword, was the best example. If Li Yundong hadn't coincidentally injected the ghost yin qi into the fan of 7 treasures, his fan of 7 treasures would have been defeated long ago. Once the magical weapon was defeated, more than half of the battle would be lost. Unless one had great Shentong and great ability, there was no way to turn the tables. Although the seven-star sword in Zhang Tianhe's hand was a powerful magical weapon of the Zhengyi school and one of the 5 famous swords in the world, Li Yundong's fan of 7 treasures was not to be trifled with. It was also a top-notch powerful magical weapon in the cultivation world. Back then, the Fox Zen school had relied on it to fight all over the world without encountering any opponents, and it had been in the limelight for a while. However, later on, the Fox Zen school did not produce any powerful male cultivators, so the reputation of the fan of 7 treasures gradually declined. Zhang Tianhe was very knowledgeable, so it was impossible for him not to know the power of the psychic fan of 7 treasures. Especially when he saw the intense and bizarre battle between the psychic fan of 7 treasures and the Nine Locust Tree Sword, even Zhang Tianhe, who was from the orthodox Xianmen sect, had his horizons widened. If the psychic fan of 7 treasures and the 7-star sword were to fight, no one could say for sure who would emerge victorious. Thirdly, just looking at whose cultivation was deeper and whose magical treasures were stronger, it was not certain that they would win. In the process of a fight, it also depended on whether the 2 sides were agile, experienced, and strong-willed. Any one of these factors was enough to tilt the outcome of the fight to one side. However, Zhang Tianhe believed that no matter which of these 3 points he looked at, he did not have the confidence to win. Watch net. 7 KOM. It's not a big deal if I lose, but it's a big deal if I humiliate the sect. In this battle, you can only win, not lose. Zhang Tianhe carefully looked at Li Yundong, trying to find some flaws. But when Zhang Tianhe saw Li Yundong standing in the field, his entire body seemed to be full of flaws. It was as if as long as he raised his hand, this guy would fall to the ground. But when Zhang Tianhe thought about the combat talent and amazing reaction that Li Yundong had shown during his 7 consecutive victories, he felt that it was terrifying. Zhang Tianhe slowly mobilized the zhenqi in his body. He secretly gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He had to defeat this rare and powerful enemy in front of him in the shortest time possible. Zhang Tianhe stood 5 meters in front of Li Yundong. He inserted the 7 stars sword into the scabbard on his back, took a deep breath, and crossed his arms, as if he was holding an invisible ball. He slowly raised it, and when he reached the highest point, his body shook violently. This shake was like a black bear shaking off lice. The clothes on Zhang Tianhe's body shook violently and made a crisp sound. Zi Yuan's eyes immediately revealed a strong look of admiration. She whispered, "What a good move, heaven and earth embrace." Ruan Hongling's cultivation was not high enough, so she couldn't see the kung fu in Zhang Tianhe's shake. She asked in confusion, "Sister Zi Yuan, what's so great about that?" Zi Yuan said, "This Zhang Tianhe deserves to be from the Xianmen sect, and he deserves to be the last disciple of Master Zhang. His kung fu is extremely pure. Look at his shake, and his whole body is overflowing with gang qi. Look at his hug just now. It means that he is holding the spiritual qi of heaven and earth for his own use, striving to be one with heaven and man. That shake is even more amazing. It shakes the gang qi all over his body into a soft effect, and the clothes on his body can actually make the sound of tearing through the air. It's amazing, really amazing." Ruan Hongling opened her mouth wide. Is Li Yundong his opponent? Zi Yuan's face was solemn. I don't know. Zhang Tianhe is undoubtedly the top cultivator of the younger generation. He is a strong opponent for Li Yundong. I can't guess who will win and who will lose when the 2 of them fight. While the 2 of them were talking in private, the cultivators of the various sects were also whispering to each other, guessing who would win between Li Yundong and Zhang Tianhe. Zhang Tianhe's shake revealed the authentic Xianmen sect's internal energy, and the momentum of his body suddenly rose to a peak. He opened his eyes, which were like lightning, and said loudly, "Jinrenli, I'm sorry." After that, the seven-star sword behind him suddenly jumped out and floated in the air, staring at Li Yundong like a tiger watching its prey. It didn't take the initiative to attack, but just put on a defensive posture. Zhang Tianhe's waist suddenly twisted, and his upper body was extremely low. His body was undulating, and his arms were stretched backward like flowing clouds. Zi Yuan suddenly widened her eyes and sent a private voice transmission to Li Yundong. This is the wind body cloud hand. Li Yundong, hit him in the middle. Don't let his luck succeed. When Li Yundong heard Zi Yuan's words, he frowned slightly. He wanted to reply, but he didn't know how to send a private voice transmission, so he just glanced at Zi Yuan. Go to C. Color * caret and text learn %super #speed. Update. Zi Yuan seemed to understand what Li Yundong was thinking and shouted anxiously, "This is the 5 Thunders spell." He was summoning lightning. Be careful. As soon as Zi Yuan finished speaking, she heard a loud crack in the sky and the sound of thunder rumbled. Li Yundong was shocked. He suddenly looked up and saw dark clouds rolling in the sky above his head, and thunder and lightning were rolling in them. However, Li Yundong was a person who had gone through divine tribulation, so his fear of this level of heavenly thunder was greatly reduced. In his heart, he even vaguely felt that he didn't have to be afraid of heavenly thunder of this level. He could even control it. As soon as this thought came to his mind, he took a deep breath, and all the Jinqi in his body rushed out from the top of his head like a beacon of smoke. It was like a long, straight line, and his qi was like a bull. He also imitated Zhang Tianhe's movements and performed the wind body and cloud hands. When the cultivators of the various sects saw that Li Yundong's movements were exactly the same as Zhang Tianhe's, they suddenly burst into an uproar. The 2 disciples of the Zhengyi school who followed Zhang Tianhe widened their eyes and shouted, "Impossible! How can he also know the wind body and cloud hands?" Hua Tuo had created the 5 animals play by watching birds and beasts. Zhang Sanfeng had comprehended the Tai Chi magic by watching turtles and snakes, and Ji Ji had created Xingyi boxing by watching 2 chickens fighting. Since ancient times, almost all martial arts and Taoism had originated from the natural imitation of animals, and the wind body and cloud hands were the same. Thunder and lightning were the power of heaven, but where did thunder and lightning come from? There was no other reason. If there was wind, there would be clouds, and if there were clouds, there would be thunder and lightning. This move of the wind body and cloud hands was a secret of the Zhengyi school. It relied on the imitation of the wind and clouds, and then mobilized one's Jinqi to attract heavenly thunder. Zhang Tianhe's wind body and cloud hands was undoubtedly the authentic one. It used a secret posture to attract thunder and lightning. Although Li Yundong's imitation was very similar, in fact, he used his own majestic Jinqi to attract thunder and lightning. Zi Yuan naturally knew the difference between the 2. Her face was suddenly full of shock. She widened her eyes and murmured, "Is he crazy?" Wan Hongling was also shocked. How can he know the wind body and cloud hands? I've never seen him practice it before. Sister Zi Yuan, did you teach him? She was in an extremely shocked mood, so she blurted out this sentence and even forgot to use the sound transmission. It immediately attracted the female disciple who had come with Zhang Tianhe, Zhou Ping, who suddenly turned her head to look at her. Her eyes flickered, and her expression was one of surprise and doubt. Zi Yuan had not come to her senses at this time. She shook her head and said, "I never taught him this. He was just imitating and confusing Zhang Tianhe." Before Zi Yuan could finish her words, Zhang Tianhe's movement of the wind body and cloud hands suddenly stopped. It was as if the stormy sea had suddenly frozen, and the stormy sky had frozen in an instant. There was a loud crack between heaven and earth, and a bolt of lightning instantly illuminated the clouds. Zhang Tianhe's hands, which were behind his back, suddenly clasped together and pinched his fingers together. He shouted, "5 thunders of the way of heaven, help me destroy evil." As he spoke, there was another loud crack in the sky. The dark clouds in the sky began to spin rapidly, turning into a vortex. In the middle of the vortex, lightning flashed, and the momentum was terrifying. The cultivators of all sects looked up at the heavenly thunder with fear on their faces. Cultivators were most afraid of thunder. When it rained on a cloudy day, those whose cultivation was lower did not dare to practice magic or use powerful magical weapons. They did not even dare to fly high. Among all kinds of cultivators, those who could practice thunder techniques were definitely the top cultivators. Zhang Tianhe's sudden use of the 5 thunders immediately shocked everyone present and made them feel fear. They thought that the power of the heavenly thunder was unstoppable. After Zhang Tianhe let out a loud shout, he suddenly pointed to the sky with both hands and shouted, "Thunder, come." The moment he pointed his finger up, Li Yundong's movements also stopped. The white qi above his head became thicker and thicker, penetrating straight into the rolling dark clouds. He also let out a loud shout and mobilized all the Jinqi in his body to attract the heavenly thunder in the clouds. Li Yundong had once absorbed the power of heavenly thunder, so when the Jinqi in his body was sent to the sky filled with thunderclouds, it immediately caused the heavenly thunder to fall. Boom! Crack! 2 consecutive thunderclaps rang out in the sky at the same time. At the same time, 2 bolts of lightning struck down and struck Li Yundong and Zhang Tianhe. At the moment when the heavenly thunder was about to strike, Li Yundong suddenly controlled his Jinqi to rush toward Zhang Tianhe. At the same time, the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head immediately closed, and all the remaining Jinqi in his body surged to the top of his head to resist. The fan of 7 treasures also suddenly jumped into the air to block the fierce heavenly thunder. Although Zhang Tianhe's 7 stars sword had also jumped into the air to block the heavenly thunder, he had never expected that the Jinqi gushing out of Li Yundong's body would also attract the heavenly thunder, causing him to be struck. Therefore, he was not prepared to resist at all. Although the 7 stars sword had blocked most of the power of the heavenly thunder, a small part of it still hit his body. The power of the heavenly thunder was not something that a human body could withstand. Zhang Tianhe was immediately struck and spat out a mouthful of blood. He fell backward. Zhou Ping of the Zhengyi school and another short and fat disciple who had gone down the mountain with them immediately rushed forward in shock. Zhou Ping quickly pointed at the acupoints on Zhang Tianhe's body, and the other kept injecting her Jinqi into Zhang Tianhe's body. Zhou Ping turned her head and looked at the scene in shock and anger. At this time, she saw that Li Yundong's hair was disheveled, and his clothes were in tatters. The shoes on his feet were also broken, and only his pants were intact. Although his figure looked extremely disheveled, Li Yundong's face was ruddy, and he was full of energy. His gaze was even sharper than before, and he was awe-inspiring, looking down on all the heroes. This shock was no small matter. Almost all the cultivators present sucked in a breath of cold air. The battle in front of them had turned into a battle of heavenly thunder between the 2 of them. This was too exaggerated, wasn't it? You have to be merciful. Thinking of this, Li Yundong cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said, "Well, I was just about to ask Zhenren Ziyuan for advice." Ziyuan nodded slightly, and her expression became cold in an instant. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and a sharp divine light shot out from her eyes. Like a sharp arrow, it pierced Li Yundong's eyeballs and made him feel a faint pain. Li Yundong subconsciously blinked his eyelids. Go to see net. 7 KOM 113 Shui for net. In an instant, Ziyuan suddenly burst into action. When Ziyuan didn't move, she was as quiet as a virgin. She stood there gracefully, and others only felt that she was like a weak willow in the wind, as if a gust of wind could blow her up. But at this time, she suddenly moved. The people on the sidelines only felt that Zi Yuan seemed to have turned into a wave in an instant, fiercely pouncing on Li Yundong like a raging storm. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he saw that Zi Yuan's figure had swayed from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3. The flowing cloud sleeve in her hand was like a raging wave, surging toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. Without thinking, he immediately took a step back. Zi Yuan's flowing cloud sleeve rushed in front of Li Yundong's face. This attack suddenly missed, but the shock made the muscles on Li Yundong's face flow. Li Yundong was shocked. Is this fairy sister for real? Before he could react, he saw Zi Yuan immediately rush forward and catch up with him again. The flowing cloud sleeve in her hand shook again, and the tip of the sleeve whipped toward Li Yundong like a steel whip. Li Yundong took another step back, and Zi Yuan missed again. This time, it was Zi Yuan's turn to be stunned. She had seen Li Yundong fight before, and he had never taken a step back. Why did he take 2 steps back in a row at this time? Zi Yuan was a little anxious. She gritted her teeth and let out a clear cry like a phoenix. With a shake of her wrist, a purple ribbon suddenly rushed out of her sleeve, like a spirit snake, and went straight toward Li Yundong's face. This move was fast and fierce, like a bolt of lightning. If someone was hit in the face, their brain would immediately burst and they would die. Li Yundong was shocked when he saw the ferocity of this attack. He took another big step back and retreated to the previous long line. At this time, the cultivators on the sidelines felt that something was wrong. Before, Li Yundong had defeated 8 people in a row, including Zhang Tianhe. When had he ever retreated? Although Zi Yuan's attack was fierce, it was not enough to force Li Yundong to take 3 steps back. There was clearly something wrong. Some of the cultivators, who had been skeptical, hissed, "What are they doing? Are they really fighting or not?" Zhou Ping took the opportunity to add insult to injury. She sneered and said, "You two have a good understanding of each other." Zi Yuan was suddenly ashamed and annoyed. She glared at Li Yundong fiercely and said in a private voice transmission, "Idiot, why did you give way? Do you want to kill me? Fight me for real." Only then did Li Yundong wake up as if he had just woken up from a dream. He reacted very quickly, cupped his hands, and said seriously, "Just now, Zhenren Ziyuan stood up for me and said a few fair words, so I let her make 3 moves in a row. Zhenren Ziyuan, pay attention." After that, he took a deep breath, opened his eyes, and glared like a fierce tiger. With a leap, he pounced in front of Zi Yuan in the blink of an eye. His fist was like a cannon, causing the air to distort. He no longer held back and attacked Zi Yuan with all his might. Go see net. 1-1, 3 shui, 4 net. Zi Yuan's spirit was lifted, and she shouted, "Come on." Her body swayed, and in an instant, she turned into an afterimage. Li Yundong shattered Zi Yuan's afterimage with a punch, and immediately felt that the afterimage quickly turned into countless purple ribbons that wrapped around his body, as if they wanted to tie his hands and feet. With a thought from Li Yundong, the fan of 7 treasures immediately jumped up. With a clang, all the leaves of the fan opened, and like a flywheel saw, it slashed toward the purple ribbons. However, the purple ribbons were the softest in the world, and the fan of 7 treasures could be said to be the hardest in the world. The fan of 7 treasures could only cut off 2 of them, and the purple ribbons that were binding Li Yundong were wrapped around itself. For a moment, the 2 magic treasures were tangled together. The fan of 7 treasures struggled desperately, and its leaves kept opening and closing like a saw chain. After a while, the purple ribbons were cut off, but the purple ribbons quickly closed and continued to tightly wrap around the fan of 7 treasures like vines wrapping around a tree. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan were fighting. He knew that Zi Yuan's magic was extremely powerful. If they fought at a distance, he would most likely be no match for her. Therefore, he rushed forward to fight hand-to-hand with Zi Yuan, forcing her to be unable to release her magic. However, to Li Yundong's surprise, Zi Yuan's kung fu was excellent, and she was proficient in the 8 trigrams palm. Her feet moved as if she was walking on mud, and her movements were as smooth as flowing clouds and flowing water. Her legs crossed like scissors, and there was a strong sense of strength in her speed. Zi Yuan's body was like a top, spinning around Li Yundong. Her movements were twisting, spinning, turning, and flipping, like a butterfly flying through flowers. Her hands pierced, stabbed, chopped, lifted, horizontally, hit, buckled, flipped, and supported, like a pair of ghostly whips. Li Yundong was surrounded by Zi Yuan in the middle, and he was attacked from all directions. However, he did not panic, nor did he play a game of circling with Zi Yuan. He just took a breath and closed his eyes. The hair all over his body was as sensitive as a radar, sensing the aura around him. As long as there was a hair that exploded, he would immediately punch in the direction of the explosion. He had to deal with all kinds of changes with constancy, and he could defeat 10 people with his strength. Every time Zi Yuan was about to hit Li Yundong, he would always be able to arrive first and attack her vital parts with a punch, forcing her to turn around to save herself. But when Zi Yuan wanted to pull away, Li Yundong could immediately sense it and took the initiative to lean on her, fighting with her. For a time, the two of them were fighting back and forth in the field, and the fight was wonderful. There were several times when Zi Yuan was about to hit, but Li Yundong was always able to predict the future and control the enemy from behind. In the face of Li Yundong's fierce counterattack, Zi Yuan was about to be hit in the vital parts several times, but she always turned over to avoid it with her unpredictable figure. Between the two of them, one was firm and fierce, and his punch was like the collapse of a mountain. However, within this firmness, he was able to produce a gentle force, which allowed him to not use too many moves. After a strike missed, he could quickly turn around to defend, and then launch another fierce attack. It was like the surging sea, wave after wave. His defense was like an abyss, and his offense was like the tide. The other was soft and continuous, like flowing water, but in this softness, there was a masculine force. Every time Zi Yuan attacked, her cloud hand was like a steel whip, and her sleeves would make a crisp sound of breaking through the air. It was clear that the soft force in her body had been cultivated to the extreme, so it was strong. When the two of them were fighting, Li Yundong's face was red, and a white qi rose from the top of his head. This white qi was condensed and did not dissipate. In the fight with Zi Yuan, he gradually changed from being passive at the beginning to taking the initiative to attack. Now, the two of them were fighting each other, attacking and defending each other. The more Zi Yuan fought, the faster her figure became. From time to time, she would take the time to cast 1 or 2 magic spells. As for Li Yundong, he became more and more excited. From time to time, he would mix in a few big handprints and slap Zi Yuan's magic spells away. At this time, everyone on the sidelines was staring at the field with their eyes wide open. No one spoke, for fear of missing any of their movements. The field was silent, and everyone was fascinated. Some people looked at Zi Yuan and couldn't help sighing. Zhenren Zi Yuan is known as the strongest master of the younger generation in the cultivation world, and it's really not a coincidence. Some cultivators who had fought with Li Yundong's side, especially Du Fei of the Chuanzhen sect of Dragon Gate. He was originally a little unconvinced, but at this time, seeing such a fierce battle between Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, he was really convinced. It turns out that Zi Yuan hasn't used her full strength just now. More cultivators saw that Li Yundong had fought continuously, and at this time, he was fighting Zi Yuan. Not only did he not show any signs of weakness, but he also became braver. The more he fought, the more powerful his Jinqi seemed to be. This made all of them change their expressions. Is this guy a monster? Doesn't he know how to be tired? How strong is his Jinqi? It's so bottomless. This is really terrifying. Just as they were sighing, the winner of the battle between Li Yundong and Zi Yuan was suddenly decided for no reason. When Zi Yuan slapped at Li Yundong's waist, for some reason, Li Yundong didn't dodge. Instead, he let go of his flaw and let Zi Yuan hit him. Zi Yuan was slightly stunned. Just as she was about to hit Li Yundong's waist, her palm moved and missed the position of his kidney. She slapped the side of Li Yundong's waist. But as soon as she slapped down, she immediately felt a very powerful force rebound from Li Yundong's body. Zi Yuan was shocked. He has fought with others so many times, but he still has such a powerful Jinqi. However, Li Yundong deliberately showed a flaw. The moment Zi Yuan hit him, the Jinqi in his body, which had been cultivated by the heavenly Jindan technique, suddenly burst out to fight back. Li Yundong roared and threw a punch at her. This loud roar made everyone's heart skip a beat. Li Yundong's punch squeezed and twisted the air. Zi Yuan only had time to block it with both hands before she was blasted away by this force. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. They couldn't believe their eyes. Even Jinren Zi Yuan has been defeated? Wan Hongling was shocked and immediately flew to support her. She saw that after Zi Yuan landed, she staggered and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. Wan Hongling immediately said angrily to Li Yundong, "How could you be so ruthless?" Li Yundong was also shocked. He subconsciously wanted to go up and check on Zi Yuan's injury, but he quickly reacted and stopped his steps. He just cupped his hands and said lightly, "Thank you for letting me win." Wan Hongling raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to curse, Zi Yuan held her down and forced herself to say, "Jinren Li is so powerful. I admit defeat." As she said this, she waved her hand and recalled her personal powerful magical weapon. Then, she turned around and flew away. Wan Hongling also flew away with her. The two of them turned into a beam of blue light and flew far away. Wan Hongling complained, "Sister Zi Yuan, you don't have to put on such a realistic act for that guy, do you? I thought you were really injured." However, Zi Yuan's face was solemn. She shook her head slightly and said, "No, that was Li Yundong's full force attack just now." With the strength of his Jinqi, he could condense it into a punch. The power was so great that I couldn't resist it. Wan Hongling was shocked. "What? You were really injured by him?" Zi Yuan nodded gently and frowned slightly. "Yes, I'm going back to meditate in seclusion to heal." Wan Hongling stomped her feet and said angrily, "Sister Zi Yuan, how could this guy be so ruthless?" "No, I'm going to make trouble for him." Zi Yuan glared at her angrily. "How can you make trouble for him? Now even I am no match for him." As she said this, she suddenly sighed, and there was a meaningful and complicated look in her eyes. From today on, he will become famous after this battle. From now on, his name will be known all over the world. /om/4527894194. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.